Good morning, Internet. This is the Oskar Quentin Debate Live, where I discuss politics and whatever I feel like talking about with strangers who call into my show on TikTok Live. If you're watching this after the fact, you can go to the pinned comment and find when the first oppositional calls, and you can find some more detailed timestamps and corrections and stuff like that in the description. I have hired somebody to do that, so it is happening better. I'm going through some old episodes to get some clips done, and I realize there's a couple episodes that don't have timestamps at all. So gotta fix that. Today's a big day, news-wise. There's a lot happening in the Supreme Court, so hence the sign today. Cheeky little Star Wars reference for the nerds. But we do have some rulings that have already come out that I'll cover quickly, just for those of you who are catching the VOD after the fact, even though we don't really have the live viewership up yet. But Executive Order 14160, which Trump used to attempt to take birthright citizenship away from undocumented immigrants, that to me seems like the biggest specific attack on Trump that we see from the Supreme Court today. It was a 5-4 ruling, and it has been shot down. So yes, the Supreme Court agrees that Executive Order 14160 was unconstitutional, and birthright citizenships are supposed to have, the children of undocumented or illegal immigrants are indeed supposed to have birthright citizenship. That's plain as day in the 14th Amendment. It was ruled on by the Supreme Court in the 1800s to clarify that fact, because a lot of the Republicans want to say it's supposed to only apply to the children of slaves. That's wrong. The Supreme Court agrees. It's by a closer margin than I would have liked to see, 5-4, but it does mean that there was some dissent among the right-leaning justices, which is good. We also have a loss for trans rights. We had 2 cases where individuals were hoping to be able to participate in sports that on teams that aligned with their gender as opposed to their biological sex, and those 2 cases were ruled party line 6-3 against trans rights. So we talk about that plenty on the show. I'm sure that'll get airtime, but I'm pretty fucking sad about that one. And there was another bipartisan split ruling that ruled on campaign financing, and setting limits on campaign finances from certain sources are supposed to indeed, or do, according to the Supreme Court, violate the First Amendment. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. I've got the Discord minding it for me because I'm live. I'm here talking to you. I'm here managing calls and stuff like that. And it's always a little bit of a decision whether I should mind the news or run the show. I've decided today I'm going to run the show because I have people to mind the news for me, because yay team, yay Discord, W Discord, right? W fans, W chat, W mods, W staff. The show is a lot bigger than me these days, and that's really, really, really exciting. So definitely chat, Discord, all you people. Keep me posted if I say something wrong on air, because that is most likely to happen when the news is fresh. I was just talking to Jesse S., who's assistant producer to the show, or producer, depending on the day, about how I venture into new topics constantly on this show, and it makes it... it puts me in danger of saying wrong things. That happened like last week with me thinking that the $300 billion that's going to Iran in the deal that was supposed to end the war was coming from the taxpayer. I got that wrong. It's coming from the Gulf Consortium. I had an oppositional caller point that out. So, W for the guest in that case. Still very bad that we're giving Iran $300 billion, even if the source isn't as bad as I thought it was. But that's the type of mistake I'm, perfectly capable of making live on air as a human being who's trying to keep up with the news just like the rest of you. I am in a privileged position that I now have a mess of people keeping up with the news for me, and I'm still going to make mistakes because I'm still a human. I'm still going to misread things. I'm still going to misinterpret things. I'm still going to... A couple of these rulings I looked at and I had to think hard about the language. I thought, okay, wait, hold on. Which side is this? Hold on, what's going on? Let me send somebody to go read this, because I don't have time to read it before I go live, because I go live every day at 10 Central Time. So if you enjoy the show, that's when it happens, live on TikTok and YouTube. A further piece of housekeeping, because I have hired some staff, we're looking to do some longer streams. We did a 3-hour stream yesterday. We're planning a longer stream tomorrow. Today, that's up to Raven, who has some work planned this afternoon. Maybe she can let me know as the stream ends if we're getting there. But for now, I will remind everybody that this is a call-in show, and if you're watching on TikTok and you hate my guts, I'd like for you to call in and tell me why. If you're watching on TikTok, let's get some W's in the chat for Midwest Progressive, who's sharing the live with everybody he knows, and he knows some interesting people. Across the board, I do really want to celebrate 14160 being shot down. It's pretty devastating that there's been an erosion of the battle for trans rights today. That's not a win. I'm sure we'll get some airtime for that later. But 14160 is going to be interesting because it's one of those maybe a dozen talking points that I use a lot because there are particular things I've gotten hyper educated about the exact language of to use as tools in the toolbox for being a debate host. While I'm comfortable going down the rabbit hole and trying to learn things and having experts up that know more than me and talking about all that stuff, it's important that we all have these specific anchor points to say this is flagrantly unconstitutional. And I can predict that the chuds are going to say something like this. They're going to say, well, the Supreme Court ruled against it. That's just like when the Supreme Court ruled against Biden's attempt to forgive student loans. The system is working. That's great. Hence the sign. Help me, SCOTUS. You're my only hope. It's the only branch of the government that's actually operating in terms of checks and balances. Sometimes my response is going to be the same thing I have said throughout the last year since this executive order was filed, which is that at what point, how many times does the Supreme Court have to rule against the president? How many times do the lower courts need to rule against the president? We forget that so many of the things that Trump does are so flagrantly and obviously unconstitutional. It doesn't even make it to the Supreme Court because the lower courts just rule against it and the appeals don't go further. I mean, they can keep appealing it up, which is why now a year later, things are finally arriving at the Supreme Court and we're getting there. But how many times do we need to see the checks and balances working to go, we have a branch of government that is misbehaving in a way that's unacceptable, perhaps committing some high crimes and misdemeanors. Perhaps we have another branch of government whose job it is to impeach somebody who commits high crimes and misdemeanors, and they're not doing their job. Hence, SCOTUS being our only hope. So it's a mixed bag today in terms of the effect of these rulings. But like I said, the news is updating, and I have a feed open from some of my trusted parties on the Discord who are going to keep me updated of the big news. So feel free to erupt in the chat. Yeah, I already see Dragon is doing what I just said you should do, which is that Alito is retiring. I just saw that in the Discord. That's news. And people are asking about birthright citizenship. Yeah, so I'm sure that we'll get more of a roundup of all of the rulings today, but I am going to move on with the show because for the people watching the VOD, I want to make sure that we're not just on repeat for the live viewers. So maybe those who are already here in the chat, as you see questions about SCOTUS saying it will be coming up today, we will be talking about it, but I did the roundup at the beginning, so probably for the next, unless it comes up in the calls in the next 20, 30, 40 minutes, I'm probably just going to run the show as normal, just so that you guys don't get sick of hearing me talk on repeat. Though, if you're here, you might be the type of person who never gets sick of hearing me talk on repeat, because that's kind of what the show is. IowaGolfer's here, and according to this window, he's a friend. That just means we follow each other because I consider him a friend of the show because he is a good faith oppositional caller who has definitely made some ground talking to me, and he and I definitely have loads of common ground. IowaGolfer, you're 27 years old. How you doing?
Good, Oscar. How are you, bud?
I'm okay. Mixed bag today, like I was saying. I'm very happy about one of these rulings. I'm unhappy about some other ones in terms of what's coming out of the Supreme Court today. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad.
What are we talking about today?
Actually, one of the SCOTUS rulings. Yeah, we're probably going to bang heads on this one a little bit, but I'm just going to see if you're consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So the one you said you were very disappointed about was transgender people being able to participate in women's sports.
Well, specifically trans women being able to participate in in sports for on the women's team. There were two similar cases that were ruled the same way, and I don't like that outcome. Yeah.
Okay. What percentage of trans women are trying to participate in women's sports?
It's astronomically small.
So is it a non-issue then that they voted either way then?
It's not a non-issue because them ruling on it in this way suggests to me that to the Supreme Court, it's not a non-issue. If they had ruled the other way, that'd be the Supreme Court saying this is a non-issue, this doesn't deserve our attention. But because they ruled in favor of the ban, they're saying, yes, we need more regulations around this, therefore it is an issue.
So the reason I ask you that is we had this conversation about voter fraud, right? Mm-hmm. You said that the percentage of it happening is so small that it's a non-issue. Mm-hmm. I've kind of come to accept that view from you. I don't have an issue with you seeing it that way.
I appreciate that.
But the way I see it is that if the percentage of trans people trying to play in women's sports is so small, then it shouldn't really be an issue with SCOTUS voting either way because it's so small.
I'm really glad you brought this angle because I do disagree with it and I'd like to explain why, but I know you pretty well and I'm not surprised that your thinking has led you in that direction. The difference is that there's such a small rate of voter fraud that it's just any attempt to address it really badly damages the voting rights of other people. Like, we've covered that to heck, you and me and other callers, is that if we try to get rid of what little voter fraud there is, we make the elections less fair instead of more fair. So I see the parallel that you're seeing, which is that there's very few voter fraud cases and there's very few trans people. Among trans people, very few of them want to compete in sports just because that's a minority of the population generally. So this is a sub-issue within a sub-issue, but we're not saying that trans sports are an issue and people need to go after them and that's a small issue. The Supreme Court ruling in this way is a little bit like us saying that we should go after the voter fraud regardless of the disenfranchisement. So it's for the same reason a problem that too much attention is being given to what a small issue is. I don't want the SAVE Act to address voter fraud because voter fraud isn't a big enough issue to warrant the problems that are caused by the SAVE Act. I don't want the Supreme Court ruling that trans individuals can't play on their gendered team for their sports because that creates problems and precedent for the Supreme Court ruling on their rights that is of no benefit to anybody, because I don't think there's any benefit at all to make these people play on their biological sex team. Does that make sense to you?
I don't agree with I don't agree with you. I believe that you truly believe what you are saying, which I respect that. I don't agree with the basis of what you're saying, but I understand why you are saying what you're saying, if that makes sense.
Well, it's specifically that when you make this parallel between how small an issue voter fraud is and how small an issue trans people playing on teams that align with their gender is, the issue is that I would be upset if the federal government, whether it's the Supreme Court or the legislative branch passing the SAVE Act or something like that, made a ruling that took away people's rights or disenfranchised people in some way because of this small issue. And that is exactly what I've seen happen today. The Supreme Court made a ruling that erodes away the rights of trans people in ways that I've expanded upon for hours and hours and hours on this show over an issue that is itself catastrophically small. Because it's perfectly possible to find an example of a trans athlete who got playing on their gendered team, maybe after not enough hormone therapy, maybe too quickly, and maybe they did have that advantage that we say would be bad. But those cases are like the voter fraud cases, where among trans athletes who are playing on their gendered team, those cases are so astronomically rare that it's not worth fucking everybody over to fix that small number of cases. It's identical to voter fraud in that way. It's not worth fucking up everybody's voting experience to address this microscopic issue, because I do think that the biological advantage that you can find one particular trans athlete having in one particular context is just we're talking about a single digit number of cases in the country, as opposed to a few thousand trans athletes who are trying to play in professional sports and a few thousand more than that who are just trying to play sports in high school and stuff.
Right. So now when you say it takes away trans people's rights, what right is it that they took away?
I believe it should be the right of trans people to play on their gendered sport on their gendered team with some basic common sense regulations about things like hormone therapy depending on their age. These are the sorts of things that, you get a doctor's note for, to say that you have been on this therapy for some such a time. I think that we all have a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I think that's what it says in the Constitution. And I think that being able to participate in society in a way that's healthy for your psychology and upbringing is a component of that. And we're taking that right away from trans people by making their high school and college experiences difficult, by not allowing them to play on the team that I think it's clear it's more sensible for them to play on.
Yeah. So if you think if they align more with one gender than the other, they should be able to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just saying what I'm understanding your position to be.
What you're doing is steel manning. You're trying to make sure you understand my position, and that's great. It's exactly what you should do in these conversations. I appreciate it.
I want to see if you're consistent with this also. So what your view is that if you align with this gender, then you should be able to be that gender and do the things that gender does.
Well, to put it, you're on the right track.
So what I'm going to bring this around to, I used to work for the state of Iowa. Okay, I worked in corrections. I saw it several times. We had, and this is because I will say we have a very progressive head of the Department of Corrections in the state of Iowa that brought new policies in for transgenderism. That said, if you are transgender, where we had males or men that identified as transgender, and they went to women's prison and they essayed a lot of women in prison. They essayed women in prison, and that was an outcome of it. Would you say that?
I'm sorry. Sorry. Give me that fact again. I want to make sure that Sorry. I was slightly distracted for a moment there by the Discord.
We had inmates in the state of Iowa that identified as transgender, so they transferred them to the female prison in Mitchellville, and then essayed female inmates.
How many? Are you talking about specific cases you're aware of, or are you talking?
It's just a few.
Yeah.
But it
So I've been there with you on this before. We've talked about the fact that you can bring me an example. In fact, earlier in this conversation with you, I mentioned you can find an example of somebody maybe switching teams, or like a trans man playing or a trans woman playing on the women's team, when I might look at their individual case and say, all right, hold on, this is not enough hormone therapy. This is not enough years of gender affirming care for it to be fair for you to play on the men's team. And I can say that that's bad. So I can look at that case that you just showed me and say, sure, that's bad, but I need data. I need data that suggests the policy is on average going to be a good one, and that doesn't supply that for me, because I'll say specifically to come back to your steel man and just give you a more clear perspective on what my thought on trans individuals in sports is. It's that we do divide the sports. That's recognized. I think most people recognize we should divide the sports into two
Common
teams.
Sense, yeah.
Right. It's obvious enough to all of us who have experience with the human condition that it would be a little bit unfair to women, to biologically female people generally, if we were to not divide them. But what I think is that it's just a better way in terms of safety and fairness, which is the reason we divide the sports, right? We can agree we divide them for safety and fairness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we're going after safety and fairness, it's we end up with a more safe and fair outcome if we go by gender with some reasonable regulations, like I mentioned, than if we just force it by biological sex. Because if you just go by the chromosome and ignore all the other data, all the other information, all the other advice from the doctors, all the other advice from the experts that study this, you're kind of just closing the door to the idea that there's a better way to divide the sports that creates more fairness and more safety. And I think it's very clear that if we go by gender with, again, some regulations around maybe in particular sports, there's particular rules about how long you need to be on hormone therapy in order to make the switch, a couple asterisks like that. I think that's just better in terms of safety and fairness. And I don't like it when the Supreme Court rules against people's safety and fairness. Again, I think that goes against our attempt to give everybody who's born in this country or who lives in this country a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think it's at odds with that goal that we have in the laid out in the preamble of the Constitution to promote the public welfare. So
now I'm gonna bring this back. I mean, this is a dead horse that's been kicked 100 times, but
so it goes on my show.
Going back into fairness, because I think one of the big issues that actually brought this into the main scope was Leah Thomas. Was what happened with Leah Thomas in the University of Kentucky, was that fair?
See, I'm averse to even try to recall the specific details of one case for a reason I've mentioned twice during this call. It's one case. I need data. You can, of course, you can find.
So you had said it should be involved in fairness and safety. Well, fairness is 50% of what you claimed it should be. What happened with Leah Thomas? Was it fair that she came in? It'd be the same argument as pointing to one illegal immigrant murdering somebody and say, is it fair to that person that they were murdered? And I would say no, but that doesn't mean that deporting all the illegal immigrants is going to prevent murders, because it's not. But what I'm saying is that it's not a sensible law enforcement policy to address murders. So this was one issue, but this one issue got blown up nationwide. I think you can agree with that. This was one of the biggest reasons that this became a issue that it was. That took the 0.5% of people in the United States, or whatever the percentage is, and blew them up into the mainstream and said, that ain't right. And that's why a bunch of people were coming up and saying, that's not right. We need to address this. I think you can agree with that. Well, I mean, if you want me to address that specific claim, isn't this the one where even if the trans athlete had not been... She came in and she changed the record books. She came in... But Riley Gaines, wasn't Riley Gaines like 6th or something anyway? No, so this was Leah Thomas. So Leah Thomas was... I don't remember what his name was. This is what I have experts for. I do have a tap out. I'm sure you've spoken with Raven, but Raven is far more knowledgeable about the individual cases than I am. Hello, Raven. It's good to see you.
First and foremost, Leah. Hi.
It's good to see you.
First and foremost, Leah Thomas, and good to see you too. Am I coming in through just fine?
Yep,
I sound a little choppy on my end.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, Leah Thomas would have, if she would have not swam, Riley Gaines would have still ended in 5th because they tied.
Yeah.
So can you explain to me how that's unfair?
Yeah, no, so I never once said anything about Riley Gaines. The thing is that when Leah Thomas was swimming...
But you brought up Leah Thomas.
Yeah, Leah Thomas. I didn't say anything about Riley Gaines, Raven. It had nothing to
Riley
do with
Gaines is
Riley
the one that
Gaines.
blew it out of proportion by crying.
I think Riley Gaines was kind of the head speaker of it, the leader of the kind of the movement on it that the Republicans kind of took and ran with.
He was a tool used by the Republican Party.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that when
in order
Leah
to
Thomas,
propagandize you into thinking that trans people in sports is unfair.
I don't remember what Leah Thomas's dead name is, and I'm not going to dead name her anyway because that's insensitive, and I'm not into doing that. Where when she swam as a male,
Yeah, I'm not even sure why you would bring that up.
so when she swam as a male, she was very unimpressive, is what I'm saying. When she went from male to female, I believe her sophomore or junior year, she went from a very unimpressive swimmer to a national champion who blew up the record books and claimed all these records and beat all these women that have been swimming hard their whole careers.
Can you show me all the records she's still holding?
Yeah, one
Can
moment.
you show me all the records she's still holding?
Iowa Golfer's teacup looking. Again, I could even just point out what I said earlier, which I do think that Iowa Golfer has some of the details here a little maybe skewed by wherever he learned them from. But even if he was catastrophically correct, even if this was an example of a trans person having a horribly unfair advantage, it still is just one anecdotal example in a country of 350 million people. And that just doesn't. That's not going to sway my argument. It could be a dramatic example of it going badly,
and you can't convince me that it's.
It's just not enough data.
So I misspoke. So at the time, she blew up the record books. They have since been removed, but she held 6 records in the NCAA. They have since been removed.
Records are broken almost every competition.
But the point of the matter is that when you go from somebody who averaged, I think, like...
So what you're saying is
50th
trans women
best?
aren't allowed to succeed in sports.
No, what I'm saying is when you go from someone who was, like, average 50th in the nation as a male... to next year, they go and all of a sudden they switch genders and they are number one in the nation, and they break 5 national records. I think that's a little unfair.
Only to have them promptly broken.
Well, they weren't broken. They were
How
removed.
is that any different from
I mean, Iowa Golfer. We could pick. I'm not knowledgeable enough about sports to come up with a specific example. Maybe we could have a sports expert come up and talk about it. But you can find examples in the history of sports where some unfair thing happens. Some referee makes an unfair call. Some piece of equipment fails and they don't rule in interference, or they do rule in interference, but the audience knows, that first attempt was so good. What a shame she didn't stick it on the second attempt, or whatever the thing it is. We can go, how unfair, and then a couple years later go, it doesn't fucking matter because the record's been broken anyway. Sports are kind of fucking unfair, and we're drawing so much attention to trans issues, even though these sorts of anecdotal unfairnesses happen all over the place. There are entire states or countries that are so disappointed in a particular loss in a sporting event or in the World Cup or something because of rain. They're not good at playing in the rain, and there was such a bad rainstorm on that day where that was an important game. Again, you can find examples of this stuff. Are we going to rewrite the rules so that sports are impossible to play because it's impossible to get rid of anecdotal unfairnesses? We need to write policy that on average create less unfairness, and that's really the only argument that's going to sway me, and you need data for that, not examples.
Can I also give Iowa another anecdote of why trans people aren't dominating sports?
Sure.
Trans women were allowed in the Olympics for 20 years and never won a single gold medal.
See, that's not an anecdote. That's data, which is good. Because it just isn't the widespread problem that we expect it to be. I mean,
it's a non-issue that you've been propagandized into believing it's worth voting for.
Now, you just said something that caught my attention there, Oscar. It's not an issue it's not the issue that you thought it was. Trans people
cis athletes
in sports.
Cis athletes taking hormones is a bigger problem than trans athletes taking hormones in terms of fairness. You realize that,
I would
right?
agree with you that. I would agree with you on that.
Then why are we talking about trans people then?
I would agree with you on that because that's the issue that was brought up today in SCOTUS.
Because
I don't mean today because obviously we're talking about it today because SCOTUS ruled on it. I mean, why are we talking about it in this chapter of American politics? Why is it so important this year? Like, that's what I'm asking. Why Why aren't people who are so mad at these trans athletes equally mad at people like Lance Armstrong? For Lance Armstrong won the Tour de France fraudulently through, I don't think I can say the word on TikTok because it has to do with the substance he used, but he used a performance enhancing, I don't think it was a substance, it was like a method of changing his blood cell count or something like that. He did something that was against the rules.
Oh,
and
no,
he won.
it was
BLOODDOPING. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on TikTok because it has to do with that sort of thing. But he did that, won for years, and we had to strip him of his titles. Like, that's a bigger scandal than any of the stuff that you're bringing up. This type of shit happens in sport. Why are we going after trans people when, once again, the actual demographic of people who are most dangerous to fairness in this case, like in so many other domains, is cis men?
So Lance Armstrong.
I could also bring up the fact that trans women have been proven medically to have a disadvantage in most things compared to their cis women counterparts, including oxygen transfer rates.
So going back to that, Oscar, I'll get to you real quick, Raven. Going back to Lance Armstrong, Oscar, Lance Armstrong was stripped of all of his titles, and he's not even allowed to compete anymore in that. He was held accountable for it.
Right. Yeah. And that was a big scandal when it happened. So I gave one example of a big scandal, but currently today in 2026, there are still more examples of that sort of thing happening than the sort of concern that we're talking about
testing with. And that's why we have testing and all that stuff, for PEDs and stuff like that. We have, professional athletes have to take tests for PEDs to make sure that they are not cheating.
Sorry, a little distracted by the Discord. Say that again.
I said professional athletes nowadays, they have to take tests for PEDs to ensure that they're not cheating or that they're not giving themselves an unfair advantage.
Yes, there are regulations around it, which we are also proposing for people who are participating in sports when they're, after transitioning. So, but people get around them in similar ways. Maybe you go on testosterone for a year while you're not performing, while you're recovering from an injury, and then you wait 6 months so it doesn't show up on your blood tests anymore, and then you get back to competing, and suddenly that's very unfair. That type of attempt at winning through unfairness is far more commonplace from cis individuals than from trans people who the data suggests are mostly just trying to live their lives. And again, the data suggests that if we include them in the gendered team, in their gendered team, instead of going by chromosomes, we end up with more of that fairness. People say that, they're going to be injuring people in high school sports, and that's dangerous. Show me data that says that's happening, because I can't find any. They're going to be dominating the record books. You can find one person of breaking a record in a way that you think was a little unfair. The record didn't stand for very long, which means it's kind of old news now. I gave examples of the fact I don't know specific examples because I don't follow sports, but I'm aware that there are numerous examples of that sort of unfairness happening in sports, because sports are like the most unfair thing that people do. Like, they're fundamentally unfair. Never mind what's between your legs. If you're born 5 feet tall, you're just not going to be very good on a basketball team, regardless of your gender, regardless of the gender of the team, regardless of the chromosomal sex of the team. So we're splitting hairs about fairness when it has to do with this issue of identity politics, when the people who are so upset about this, the people who give it a lot of airtime, the people who call into my show and are upset about it, don't actually seem to be concerned with fairness in sports, because if they were, they would give equal time to these other issues: interference, bad calls from referees, people who are using performance enhancing substances when they're not trans. Like, these are big commonplace issues that affect the fairness of sports in a bigger way. Why do we spend 99% of our time talking about sports and politics, talking about trans people, when they represent such a small amount of the unfairness? And I think broadly, they don't actually contribute to the unfairness in a way that's even measurable.
Can I also bring up that one of the dissenting opinions mentioned how there was not a single piece of scientific evidence based in the agreeing opinions?
Yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to for me. It's like, if you could show me that what happened to Riley Gaines is the norm, then we can talk. But because nobody ever has been able to present that information, I have nothing to say about it other than show me the data, because once again, nobody can.
This is a further testament to how devastating Dobbs being overturned is, because that required actual science and evidence-based arguments for, I think it was making laws specifically. And so now that was overturned, that opened the door to discriminating against trans people without the need for any scientific basis. And that's why they're challenging it now.
Yeah, it's, that iterative erosion, one little teeny step at a time, so nobody notices, so nobody thinks it's a big deal. But here we are, talking about it. But yeah, I the bottom line for me is just that I think I try to be consistent, and if somebody points something out to me that is as big an issue as something else that I am very upset about, it should demonstrate inconsistency if I'm not then equally upset about it. So I try to point out people's inconsistencies in their beliefs on this show. And it's one of the things I think is reliably inconsistent about people who are upset about trans sports, is that if we look at other issues of fairness in society, they don't give a shit. They don't care that the president is starving children by taking away SNAP benefits from their parents, even if you subscribe to so selfish an argument as saying those people didn't work hard enough for to get this benefit from the government. The fact that we're taking away from children, who people under the age of 18 we decide are not even responsible to themselves, never mind sports, that's a bigger grievous unfairness in our country. And the fact that in the everyday discourse amongst us common folk here on TikTok, the fact that we get more airtime for trans rights than for feeding hungry kids, that, why are we spending time on this? I know why we are. Why is the SCOTUS spending time on this? Why are they ruling in a way that makes it a bigger issue than it has to be? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Also, can I point out the fact that they have tried to take gun rights away from trans people? They're taking this case all the way up to the Supreme Court about trans people in sports. They're trying to actively take away my medicine as a veteran that I earned fighting for this country, or defending this country. They're trying to take away my medical freedom. I'm a veteran. I've earned that. I think I should earn the right to have my HRT covered by the government. Do you not?
Still there, golfer?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Do you not think I should deserve medical freedom?
Yeah, I think you should have the freedom to do whatever you want with your body. Absolutely.
But you're okay with me being discriminated for making that choice?
Yeah, specifically Raven's a veteran, so the government's supposed to provide health care, but because it's up for debate whether or not gender affirming care is health care, Raven might be in a situation where that health care gets taken away. That's a bigger fucking problem than an academic sports record that got broken a couple of years later. Yeah.
The stress that I've had to wake up every day and hope that my medicine shows up in the mail for the last 2 years, that's what Trump's done to me as a veteran.
Yeah, I absolutely understand why you guys have the views that you have. I completely understand that we live completely different lives.
But can you not see the bigger scope that all of these rights that they're trying to take away from trans people are because it's based in discrimination and not based in fact? It's a clear, concerted effort to oppress trans people. They're dehumanizing language over the last few years, just in the social media presence. Like I said, trying to take away our Second Amendment. They're trying to take away our medical freedom, our autonomy. They're trying to label us as terrorists. They're saying that if you support transgenderism, which isn't even a word, that you're deemed a terrorist and you promote un-American values. Does that not all add up to you?
Yeah, so I wouldn't agree with any of those statements.
But that's the party that you're supporting if you support Republicans.
So I support with who I align. I shouldn't even say who I align with more. I support. How should I say this?
Just say you're selfish, Iowa. It's okay.
I absolutely, yeah, I am selfish. I'm not going to deny that whatsoever. I mean, I will vote for what is in my family's best interest, what I believe is in my family's best interest.
And that's where I say the left has the high horse. The left fights for everyone while the right fights for themselves. Yeah. And that's not American. That's egocentric.
I agree completely with Raven. And my whole position here is that, I always have to say that it'd be great if you weren't selfish. I'd much prefer that, IowaGolfer. But even if you are selfish, I would argue that you still don't want to live in a country where the Supreme Court makes these sorts of rulings. Because what the fuck are you going to do when they come for you? Do I need to read you the poem? Do you know the poem I'm talking about, IowaGolfer?
Are you aware of how the Nazis treated transgender people, Iowa?
I'll read it because I think
I'm back. Sorry about that.
Well,
What was
okay.
your
So
poem?
the poem has to do with the Holocaust, and I'll read it quickly because it's short. It says, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." We're halfway through this poem, dude. That's why, if you're going to be selfish, that's why you should care. It should matter to you that there's historical precedent for what happens after these sorts of erosions of rights that for people who aren't in your group. You're still willing to vote for people who are eroding rights in this way because you don't recognize the moral of this poem, which is that if you allow the government to go after groups of people who don't deserve it, those people aren't going to be around to help you when they come for you. In some way that matters to you and your family.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
If we successfully deport all of the illegal immigrants and the grocery stores don't have enough produce because illegal immigrants represent about half of the labor force that grow, in the agriculture industry in this country. If we start running out of grain, if food becomes expensive or unavailable, you're going to feel like you've been gone after. But by that point, if it goes that direction, I will probably, by the time the grocery stores are having a hard time because we've successfully deported that many illegal immigrants, I would argue I'll probably already be in prison, so you won't be able to talk to me about it. That's what I'm worried about.
I'll have been executed.
Yeah, I would agree that by the time either of those, if I'm in jail and the grocery stores are running out of food, Raven's probably dead, and this show is canceled.
I'd bail you out, Oscar.
I don't think
You can't bring me back to life, Iowa.
Yeah, I hate to fearmonger, but I am terrified of what's going to happen if Trump maintains control of the government through the second half of his term.
They're trying to open active legal ways to institutionalize trans people. That's not hyperbolic. That is actively in the works.
So what do I need to do in the future to ensure that stuff doesn't happen then?
Vote blue.
Vote blue and tell people in your life what I just told you. Share that poem. Thanks for the gifts, everybody. I know they're rolling in. I'm just a little distracted.
So
by
I need to vote blue no matter who.
Well, I don't like that
human
phrase.
Rights, yes.
Yeah, in November of 2026, almost certainly I have been presented with a couple of examples where the Democrat is such a reprehensible character, it might be worth losing a single seat to avoid him. Looking at you, Maine. But I'm still on the edge about those cases because there's so much value in the Republicans not maintaining control of the legislative branch. Because right now I'm saying, SCOTUS, you're my only hope, and they're fucking it up. I'm not happy with all their rulings today. Very happy about one of the rulings today, but that's not really enough. This is our last hope because the other two branches of government are both misbehaving. One is completely in allegiance to the executive branch, the congressional Republicans. And that system of control should terrify you, even if you aren't a trans person, for a reason that is expounded by that poem. That poem says it's not about them coming for you right now, it's about them coming for you later, whatever coming for you means, because it doesn't mean necessarily kicking in your door and imprisoning you. It could mean, I don't know, what if the government requisitions the food that was supposed to go to your grocery store? That's an example of the government coming after you. And that's a lot of Republicans, if they could push a big red button that just teleported every illegal immigrant back to the country they came from, they would push it, not recognizing how dramatically irresponsible a button that is to press, because we would have a instability in the food market, like I just described. It would be a disaster, and that's just one domain. We could talk about what would happen to all the businesses that depend for labor from illegal immigrants at the low level. Instead of maybe giving those people some labor rights and making society better and continuing to progressively benefit from that, let's just delete the foundation of the country, which is low-level laborers, because every company depends on low-level laborers to actually affect the outcomes of their business. Amazon, Jeff Bezos could die tomorrow and Amazon would still be powerful. But if every delivery driver in America got deported, not that I think Amazon's hiring any or many illegal immigrants, but my point is the low-level laborers are what make a company great, and Amazon would struggle without its delivery drivers, even though they don't seem important, in the same way the agricultural industry would struggle if it lost all of its illegal immigrant laborers, even though they don't seem all that important on an individual basis. It's just short-sighted thinking, and it's not thinking that demonstrates that you have a strong historical lens, because we've seen governments do this in the past in living memory. My grandma's 90. I talked to her about this stuff. She's terrified about what she's seeing because she knows from experience. She didn't have to learn history. She lived it, and she's terrified based on what she's seen in her own lifetime, because it takes us about a lifetime to forget about the evils of society. Every 80 years, we do it again. We blame some group of people for the problems created by the powerful. We gather them up, and whether it's trains, planes, boats, or whatever, doesn't matter. We do something horrible to them that people like you allow to happen because you're not the ones being gone for yet. People who have that historical lens, whether it's because of experience, like with my grandmother, or somebody younger who's lived in a country where it's happened more recently, or just somebody like me who's read enough books about it, I look at it and I see it as fucking terrifying for everybody, not just the people who are currently getting the short end of the stick. But Raven's farther up the list than either of us. I'm up farther up the list than you, IowaGolfer, because I run this show, but they're working on the list. You should pay attention.
And I would argue that trans people are quickly moving up the list in front of immigrants. I know, obviously, I'm not trying to minimize what immigrants are going through right now, but we're seeing victories pushing back against that while we see trans issues continuously almost 100% slide through. We talk a lot about throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and what gets through. Almost 100% of the trans issues are sliding through. So I would say when we get as far as to executing people for who they are, trans people may be the first.
So I want to be sure here. So I believe today the issue with the trans bills the trans deal that was viewed today was upholding state decisions, correct?
I don't know exactly what level the decisions
I believe
that were being upheld
they were upholding states that barred transgender people from being in sports.
If only the Republicans would allow states' rights to do sanctuary cities and not complain about that.
It's a bit of a pivot, but it is a good counter argument in terms of the general state of affairs that Raven just brought up, which is that
I'll own the pivot.
Well, I mean, it's a good example that the issue is that we're unfairly applying that type of reasoning to trans people instead of applying it across the board, because reasoning, I would argue, isn't good reasoning if you can't apply it across the board. Because I think that the federal government exists to protect human rights broadly, and that's why the federal government restricts the things that the states are allowed to do. So because of the argument I gave earlier about how I think that this is a ruling that goes against people's pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and all that we want in the Constitution, I would say that it's bad that the federal government isn't protecting those rights.
So basically what I'm saying is that what I'm saying is that is voting blue no matter who the fix to states putting bars on transgenders in sports?
Yes, and don't call them transgenders. It's transgender people.
My apologies.
That's okay. It's a common mistake.
Yeah, I do always really appreciate your effort to get those things right, because some people...
Me too.
I will always say, people on the left who jump down somebody's throat for making an honest mistake like that are not helping, so... W everybody for that little moment there. But yeah, I really think the important thing to consider here, the bottom line, is that this is a very, very small group who are, according to the data, just trying to live their lives, and they're being gone after, and you should consider the poem, First They Came. You should read that poem a lot.
The comment you made when you first joined about why should we care if a small group of people are being oppressed by the government, that poem is exactly why. Do you understand the connection?
So the reason I had brought that up is I've had this, I'm sure you've heard it too, Raven. We've had this knockdown drag out about voter fraud before, where Oscar's stance on it was, if it's such a small proportion or such a small issue, it shouldn't even be an issue that's brought up to anybody. It's such a non-issue, we're not going to worry about it.
And the Supreme Court would be agreeing with me about your parallel if they had ruled the other way. Because they ruled to create regulations around this, that demonstrates to me that they recognize it as a big enough problem to try to regulate away, when my whole argument with voter fraud is that it's too small a problem for it to be worth regulating away because of the costs of regulating it away. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Because of how small of a problem it is, it should have never even gone to a lower court, let alone the Supreme Court.
Yeah. So how is it that it got brought to the Supreme Court then? Because
the Republicans are in control of what has media attention, and also control of the Supreme Court. The Republicans are the ones bringing these things up to the Supreme Court.
Just to be clear here, is your claim that Republicans have control of the media and what gets brought up in the media sphere?
Disproportionately so, yeah.
So wouldn't most of the stories about President Trump be positive if they had control of what was brought up in the media sphere?
That doesn't necessarily follow. Yeah, well, because it's not that all the stories would suddenly be positive. It's that the stories would better reflect his behavior, which they actually happen not to do.
What percentage of media stories with Republican? I'd actually be interested to know the data behind this. What percentage of media is favorable to the Republican Party nowadays?
What you need to think about is the negative space in media, what's not being reported because they're choosing to report on other things. The fact that Fox News had some 400 reports on trans people, also side note, with never once having a trans person there to speak for themselves, that's covering up the issues that you're not being told about. The rising prices, the oil wars, the fact that we had no right to go into Venezuela.
So I'm gonna push back on this because I think the answer to this is very important. If you want to move on to the other stuff later, that's fine. But I really want to get an answer on this because I think it's important, and I don't think it should be kind of the goalpost should be moved. If the claim is that media coverage is majority positive for Republicans, what percentage of the media coverage is actually positive for Republicans? I think that's important because I can't remember the last time I saw.
Have you ever considered the fact that they're telling you only specific bad things?
Can I finish my question, please?
Sure.
I'm trying to be respectful.
I mean, I understand where you're going, and you're misrepresenting.
Let's let him finish.
Yeah, no. So what I'm saying is that I cannot remember the last time that I saw anything positive on the news about President Trump, except Fox News. And Fox News isn't even a news organization. It's an entertainment outlet.
Right,
they can't even call themselves news. They're entertainment.
Correct.
I cannot remember the last time I ever saw anything positive about President Trump, J.D. Vance, or the Republican Party on the news.
Can you tell me something positive he's done?
What's that?
Can you tell me something positive he's done that's worth reporting on?
Not really.
I've got a couple.
That's my point.
There are a couple of nice. I always call it the sprinkles on the dog turd, which is like don't point at the dog turd and advertise how tasty the sprinkles on are. Because yeah, Donald Trump did take away tax on tips. He did reschedule the M drug, which I think is a really important step for us to take in America to get rid of this disproportionately unfortunate for minorities and poor people war on drugs. There's a couple of little things like that I can point at just because I have a top-down perspective of what he's getting up to. But I want you to consider heavily the fact that the reason there's so much bad reporting on Trump is because it's very hard to do good reporting on Trump. And furthermore, about the issue of media control generally, TikTok exists under an umbrella where if you go all the way to the top to the person who has executive control, the chief executive officer, I forget who it is who now is in charge of the American branch of TikTok, but it is a Trump loyalist. So the fact that I'm on here might seem like a counterexample, but there's actual data and studies about how people like me perform in the algorithm on platforms like TikTok and YouTube, which has a similar problem in other places.
Oscar, you're blowing up. You can't say that. You're doing awesome, dude. I'm proud of you.
I'm so happy that you're proud of me, and obviously I'm wildly excited about what's going on with me, but there's another anecdote. We shouldn't care how well Oskar Quentin is doing. We should recognize the fact that the only reason he's succeeding is because he's such a damn fast swimmer, because I'm fucking swimming upstream by making content that's on the left. You get a fast track in the algorithm if you're on the right. That's what I'm suggesting the data shows, and that's because there is disproportionate financial Republican-leaning control, Trump loyalist control of the major media companies in this country, whether we're talking about social media or traditional news media. Even things like CNN are owned by people who are fucking evil. Look at the news organizations that Jeff Bezos has purchased and now has chief executive control over. It's concerning.
Also, as somebody in chat pointed out, you can see the negative spaces in reporting like I was talking about in the coverage of Sleepy Joe versus the fact that Donald Trump can't stay awake through a single one of his meetings. You've never heard about that. You don't hear memes being made about
I've absolutely seen every time that President Trump has gone to sleep in his meetings. I see it all the time.
But where do you hear it from?
I've seen it on CBS. I've seen it on CNN. I've seen it on NBC. I've seen it just about everywhere. I saw it on Fox News that they were talking about him going to sleep.
You don't hear about it on
Fox News that he was going to sleep.
But how do they cover it? They just cover it and let it go. They don't drag into it and bring it up every single day.
Do they call him Sleepy Trump in the headlines?
Right. Or do they say he was working so hard all night that he just couldn't stay awake?
Yeah, they excuse it. People on the show excuse it. IowaGolfer, I love you, but I think you're cut off. You get too much airtime today.
All right, I love you too, Oscar.
I will buy you that beer someday, even if I have to drive down to Iowa to do it. And
we are going to get together. I was supposed to play golf up there again in a couple months. I don't know. Depends on when I'm supposed to get back up there. Yeah,
get your last word in, Raven, sure.
You can also look at how Trump's been weaponizing the FCC licenseships, and as well as the reporters that he lets into his newsroom are all extremely either right-wing or just wacky, crazy independent that are essentially right-wing that won't say the right wing. So the people that he's allowing access to information is very biased. And he's also threatening to pull people off the air that he doesn't agree with.
First they came for who now? Go read the poem.
Comedians. Although, well, that's not in the poem.
Oh, yeah. Well, right. We have to modernize the poem, right? We're not talking about trade unionists as much as comedians
Hitler also
these days.
Went after comedians first, though.
Yeah.
That's fair.
He came after Freemasons, too, and I'm a Freemason, so I understand the history behind it, but...
For being good faith, W's in the chat for the guest, because I consider IowaGolfer to be a reasonably good faith caller, and I like having them up. But I do want to talk to some other people today. So
as a trans person, I'll slightly disagree, but
fair.
For the most part.
I appreciate you, Oscar. I would almost call you a good friend. I think if we do meet in person, we will actually learn to become good friends. I'm
excited to meet you in person, Iowa.
I look forward to shaking your hand. W's in the chat for IowaGolfer, and W's in the chat for Raven for coming up and helping me out, because I am sometimes a little bit out of my depth on that topic. We do have people in the queue, so stay tuned for more calls, but I am going to handle some housekeeping. First of all, I'm going to bring up my good friend Oskar Quentin, too, who you should follow. Getting better at muting myself fast enough so I don't speech jam myself. Yeah, he does really good shows on days where this account can't do shows because it's banned, so you should follow him. That's me. Follow me. Follow the backup account. Additionally, I am going to thank the donors on YouTube and Venmo and stuff, because I've been letting them pile up because I really wanted to zoom in on that conversation with IowaGolfer. So thank you for being so patient. Kronos over on YouTube Super Chat, who sent me $5 to say, morning all. Hope to stay up for the whole live this time. You all ready for the crazies? Yeah, Kronos has had a crazy sleep schedule over the last couple of days, so W's in the chat for Kronos for showing up. Jack sent me $2 on YouTube Super Chat to say, it's like fumigating a mansion to kill 3 ants. I think he's talking about the disproportionate action against trans people, and I agree, that's a good analogy. He could be making that analogy about trans people. He could be making that analogy about going after voter fraud by disenfranchising voters through the SAVE Act. It's the same argument. Ego on YouTube sent $5 to add to the conversation. Voter fraud rare, T-Sports rare. Stop making it a big voting issue that goes to the Supreme Court. Having to be ruled on either way is the issue. I agree. Specifically, it being ruled in the way that I think is the bad way makes it way worse. But the fact that it even made it that far is just demonstration of the problem. Alana sent $5 to say, protect the dolls with some hearts, and the trans boys too. Yeah, and the hearts are the trans colors. And Ellen, welcome as a YouTube member, or welcome supporter, subscriber, member, whatever it is. They join. They get the blue star in the YouTube chat. I appreciate you. And then over on Venmo, we have Courtney, who sent $2 to say, love the show, great work. Another great way to boost out the stream besides reposting is to have people click the share button. It counts even if they don't share the link to your stream. Oh, good to know. Good to know. Good to know. Kronos is still here for $2 on YouTube Super Chat. W's in the chat for Kronos and for Courtney and for David, who's been a big donor over the last few days. David, let's see if David added a message. If the Venmo app wants to cooperate. He says, we are not elite billionaires in the 1%. They can come for us. They can come for you. Yeah, it's pretty much, it's like 100,000 people who are safe at the very tippy top. 10,000 people, something like that. Those are the safe parties in this current political climate. And I really try to preach this message of unity, that it shouldn't be left versus right. It should be top versus bottom. It should be us. It should be we the people versus the short list of assholes who are fucking up democracy in this country. And I had a couple of buy me a coffees to buy. I get emails for those, so forgive me if I forget to read them, because Lucky Phil said, why is the government involved with sports? Shouldn't the decision be made by the sporting organizations and participants? Yeah, again, that's kind of similar to what was said on YouTube Super Chat about how the fact that it's even getting to the Supreme Court is a demonstration. And he adds to that for another $2, more like Scrotus. I've been waiting for somebody to make the joke today. I chose a Star Wars reference. I went a different route. I think that's everybody who's donated in the last few minutes. So if you want to contribute to the show, you can do it for free by following me on the other platforms. In addition to Oskar Quentin 2, there's Oskar Quentin Music on TikTok. That's the backup account, but you can find all of the accounts, including my Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, in the link tree in my bio. So those are all the different places to follow me. If you want to watch the show when I'm not live, it is on YouTube in VOD form podcast. You can listen to me when I'm not live over there. Go check that out. Doesn't cost a dime to help out in that way. And if you have a dime that you want to spare, like all the kind people whose donations I just read out, you can send it to my Venmo, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, or Patreon. And that helps pay my bills, and that helps pay the staff, because I have 2 people who work for the show to keep me going and keep me streaming longer. We're trying to up the 2 hours a day, 10 to 12 Central Time, to 3 hours, 10 to 1, and then eventually, hopefully, 10 to 2 Central Time. That is the goal. That'll happen behind me. What is the bird behind me in the chat? This is a Rebel Loon flag that I bought on Pride Day this weekend. So it's got some of the LGBTQIA plus colors on it, and I like it. I thought it was a nice addition to my backdrop, which does need some reworking. I know it's pretty cluttered back there. Anyway, that is the ad read. Thanks for putting up with it, everybody. I am going to hop over into the guest request queue, and we're going to talk to the letter M, and we're going to see if they make sense. Hello, how old are you?
I'm 21.
21. Do you support Trump?
Nah, but I just kind of took issue with a tactic that you used yesterday, if you're willing to talk about that for a little bit.
After I noticed that Butt Mustard sent me sunshine for 200 joules on YouTube Super Chat, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Butt Mustard. Yeah, sorry, what was your concern about what I said yesterday?
So you were talking to this Phil Burr or whatever about whatchamacallit, like why he supports Trump, and he's kind of like talking about how he supports Trump for, I would imagine he's talking about practical reasons. I remember feeling off-put by some of the like philosophical traps he was trying to place or whatever. But once he like identified that he believed that Trump was a rapist, right? You kind of really harped on that and was like, okay, so you support Trump, even though, while he's a rapist, and he's kind of trying to be like, oh, well, I support his policies. I don't support him as a person. I support him. You know, yeah, I think it's
the line he was comfortable with is that he was willing to call the proposition, I support Donald Trump as president. That's what we landed on. So he supported Donald Trump as president. He also separately recognized that Trump is probably a rapist. And we were, he was a Phil bro, so I was trying to get him to do some very basic propositional logic. If we have the statement A, that Trump is a president that he supports, and B, that Trump is a person who he believes to be a rapist, he should be comfortable saying Trump is the president I support and he's a rapist. But he wasn't willing to say the two together, which demonstrates he was unwilling to apply basic propositional reasoning to his own arguments, to his own positions.
Yeah, I just feel like the move of like being like, yo, like, I don't know, you seem really offended by the fact that he supports Trump, even though Trump is a racist, which I think is bad, obviously. But
well,
it's the
it
sort
was
of thing
rapist,
where, like,
but we could also swap in racist. Both work. I do think it's bad to support Trump when he's a rapist and a racist, in consideration of the fact that there was a candidate available who was neither.
Yeah, but it's more of a thing where like, you were like, show your face, like you're a piece of shit. You're kind of shitting on the dude, which he might be worthy of. But I also feel like if you apply this logic where he's trying to clarify that like he supports policy, not Trump as a person. And
I recognize
even though he supports Trump while he's a rapist, that qualifies for him to be like more morally objectionable or whatever. Yeah. But in my opinion, right, like if you I don't know, if you apply that logic to like a Biden, for example, like you can consider Biden to be a genocide enabler. Like if you apply that sort of logic.
Just a moment ago, I was really careful to say that the reason it's reprehensible to support Trump, even though he's a racist and a rapist, is because there was a candidate available who isn't a racist and isn't a rapist. So if we're going to talk about the global South, if we're going to talk about how fascistically the United States behaves on the global stage, yes, you are correct that establishment Democrats like Biden, like Harris, are people who are not good in that domain. But there isn't an available candidate who isn't, so we can't say the same thing. It's not bad to support Harris because, she might not do everything we want her to on Gaza, because it's not as though there's a candidate who's going to do so much better. Trump isn't going to do anything better for Gaza. Look at how Trump is behaving with Israel. I think that position is nonsensical.
Which one? Which position is nonsensical?
I think that the reason we can say it's bad to support Trump, because even though he's a rapist, is because the other candidate wasn't a rapist. But we can't say the same thing about being bad to Palestinians, because both candidates were going to be bad to Palestinians, and I argue that Trump is going to be worse to Palestinians. So the same argument doesn't work.
I think that's fair. I think you were a little bit more on smoke with the dude. It just like your reaction just seemed to me very like show your camera, dude. Like he's a rapist, and you support him. Where it's like,
He knew. The reason I urged him to do that, it's a tool I use sometimes to just say that because you've said something that you yourself recognize to be reprehensible, I want to amplify for my audience the fact that you disagree with your own beliefs. I want to amplify that cognitive dissonance by showing that you're not willing to let yourself be identified with your beliefs. Because a proper Philbro, somebody who actually believes in propositional logic, should be perfectly comfortable saying something like, here, I'll do it. I supported Kamala Harris in 2024, and Kamala Harris, I think, would be bad for Palestine compared to a more progressive candidate. So therefore, A and B are both true. I supported Kamala Harris, even though she was going to be bad to Palestine compared to a more progressive candidate. See how I'm willing to do that because I'm consistent in my beliefs? But he wasn't willing to do that because he didn't want that soundbite of him saying that to exist, which demonstrated that he doesn't want the rules of reasoning applied to his positions.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess my last question is just, so you don't think that well, yeah, okay. You explained that it doesn't apply because there was no other candidate available. That would
if Trump was going to be awesome to Palestine, that'd be a great argument. But no, he wants to remove the people from it, which is some pretty spooky language about a group of people, and repave it into some kind of resort. I don't think Kamala Harris was going to do anything that bad.
Okay, that's fair. And I guess I have one more question, which is that obviously, we can all kind of acknowledge that politics and voting in America right now is sort of a lesser of two evils thing. Mm-hmm. And for example, in 2024, I was younger and I didn't really fully understand the repercussions. I mean, I'm in a state where it was going to be blue either way, or whatever. Democrats are going to win either way, but I didn't vote in a very much and what I think is a very valid disdain and sort of feeling about the general state of politics, which is that it seems to be deeply rotted to its core. So I guess I'll just ask but then obviously there's real repercussions to Trump winning. Of course, there was a lesser of two evils, and the worst situation is happening right now as a result of him winning, which is why I'll probably be voting in the future. But how do you kind of help people who are in that state though of this shit is so deeply evil that I just don't even want to engage with it? What do you say to people like that?
Don't give up hope. Don't be that victim. It's a hard thing to say to victims of a system that isn't enfranchising them in the way that I want for you to be enfranchised. I'm sad that you live in a state where your vote doesn't feel like it counts in the presidential election, but complacency is only going to make it worse. Your vote in a state where if your state is necessarily obviously going to be in favor of one particular party, your vote still counts in an important way, because there's people like me who are developing a little bit of a foothold in the public discourse who are infuriated about the electoral college system. Hillary Clinton just came out and talked about how robbed she feels for having won the popular vote and lost the election because of the electoral college in 2016. So every vote in a state that was going to vote for her anyway is a vote that increases the margin by which she should have won. You are putting your vote into this data set where people can point and go, look at how unfair this system is. It would have been made for everybody who didn't vote because they didn't think their vote was going to count. That disparity could have been larger, and that disparity being larger makes it more obvious to people that our election system, in terms of the electoral college and larger federal seats like that, needs greater reform to stop disenfranchising people who happen to have like-minded neighbors when they're voting on something that affects more than just their like-minded neighbors. Because I believe with my heart that the presidential vote in this country should be a popular vote. I think it's really unfair, but it sucks that your vote doesn't change the outcome, but your vote does potentially change the outcome later down the line when we look at past elections and see how unfair they've been.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you think that there's any, you don't think that there's any moral sort of issue with voting for someone who you, I don't know, for example, I guess genocide is the only example I can think of right now, but it's just so prevalent on my mind to where it's to support someone who is going to engage or on a deeper level.
Establishment Democrats aren't doing enough.
Money, which is also poisoning the blood of politics or whatever.
I could talk about law enforcement. I think that establishment Democrats are also pretty guilty of supporting law enforcement in a way that continues the institutionalized problems that law enforcement have, particularly regarding racism and other ways that they affect minority communities. I could list some stuff, absolutely, but we can't work on that stuff if people like me get locked up, which is what's going to fucking happen if the Republicans win the midterms. I don't talk about it very much, but when we talk about harm reduction, I almost prefer self-preservation, because I'm a person who really does think I'm going to find myself in a prison cell if the Republicans win the midterms. So vote for Oskar to not go to jail.
For sure. All right, well, that makes sense. That's really all I wanted to talk about.
I appreciate that. That seemed reasonably good faith. If that's all you got, I'll let you go.
All right, for sure. See you.
W guessed? I don't know. chat decide. I do like taking those little interview calls where they just want my position on a couple of things, because it does create like a nice 10 minutes of the show where somebody can get my actual background perspective on some of these things, because a lot of those questions get to issues that are really, really important. And I spend a lot of time focusing on how to talk to people who are farther left than me, who hate the Democrats more than I do, or maybe get them to realize that we actually hate the Democrats equally. I just recognize that the Democrats are the mechanism by which we can get to a better system in this country. So I do try to give that the appropriate airtime. And for whatever it's worth, it is the topic that was being discussed when Dean Withers decided to platform me. So yay. Maybe I'm getting some of my thoughts in his ears. According to him, I am. We're going to talk to RFKiddingme. RFKiddingme. Funny username. I hope it's not a friendly, though, because I want to keep the debates going, and I want to remind everybody to get double tapping away on the screen so more people see the debates if you're watching over here on TikTok. Hello. How old are you?
How we doing, Oscar? I am 39, Arkansas resident. I was one-time Trump supporter early on, one-time Trump voter, but the last election I did vote Harris because of the things with January 6th. I had a question for you as far as with the ruling given about the transgender issue with the Supreme Court ruling that trans men can't play in women's sports. Does that also apply to trans women not being able to play in men's sports? Is it all across the board, or are they?
I don't know. I don't know the language of the decision. I haven't read it. Maybe the Discord can let me know. Thank you for the tiny float, Aussie. But I would hope that the language is not gendered specifically. If I were on the Supreme Court, even if I disagreed with the ruling, I would want it to be one that applies unilaterally. But I don't know the exact language.
Right, and that would make sense.
Yeah.
And the second part of this question is that if now they're applying this. And so I started looking at a little bit at the ruling, and it's partly broad, which I don't like. What's to stop them from the future to applying this? See, now that they're not allowing them certain sports due to uncomfortability and everything else with what they listed, what is to stop them from applying this to employment?
Well, I think that you got, I don't know how much of my earlier call you were listening to, but I read out the poem about, at first they came for the so-and-so.
Oh, no, I'm very familiar with that. That's why I'm wondering, is this eventually going to kick down the road again? But it's going to be towards this, because
we're already in a process like this step of the Supreme Court ruling in this way is already along a chain of erosions of rights. So yes, I agree with you completely. It's a terrible sign of things to come. It gives the Supreme Court their own precedent to go after some other group in some way that maybe doesn't seem important if you're not a member of that group. But that's why we read that poem, which I've already read out.
No, my aunt was removed from her military service. She was actually probably 4 years from retiring out.
Yeah, and I just had a regular co-host of the show who helps work on the show, who is a trans woman who is worried about losing her gender-affirming care as part of her health care because she's a veteran. So yeah, it's disastrous. So I appreciate the quick conversation about that, but I'd like to open the channel up for more oppositional callers. But I do appreciate.
No, absolutely, you're doing good work, man. And if you ever run, you got my vote.
Good to know. Thanks for changing your mind, dude.
Thank you.
W's in the chat for RFKiddingme for changing his mind, because we're not going to win this by being mad at a third of the country forever. We should be mad at about 5% of the country forever. And I'd like to point out that I genuinely believe it is disproportionately people from that very evil single-digit percentage who call into my show. I don't think your average Trump supporter is as reprehensible as the average person who calls in to argue with me. But we need to have some grace for people who are willing to, as somebody said, I think in the Discord or in the chat today, vomit up the Kool-Aid. I support inducing vomiting for the Kool-Aid. We shouldn't make people digest it. We should invite them to get care for having drank that poison. It's just, again, we can be mad about it. Like, you're rightfully upset with these people. You can be mad that they didn't recognize the plight of people who aren't like them or something like that. But in terms of getting what we not want, thank you, October, for the gift on YouTube Super Chat. In terms of recognizing what the path forward in terms of protecting these rights that we also care about, just being mean to everybody who ever voted for Trump is not the fucking move. Not at all. That one communist was upset in the chat. He said that it's a band-aid for a bullet hole to vote for Democrats. Here we go. Let's check how old he is first. How old are you?
Oh, 23. He, him, Seattle. I don't know what else.
That's fine. I mean, I don't know if are you. I don't think you're a Trump supporter. I think you're a communist, right?
Yeah, very much so a communist.
Okay, I don't think that band-aid for a bullet hole. You said in the chat that you think that voting for Democrats, like voting blue in November, is band-aid for a bullet hole. Am I understanding that correctly? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, can I expand on that a little bit?
Sure.
I think a lot of the time. So I didn't vote in the national election, and I've never voted in a national election. I do, however, vote and participate in local elections. Obviously, like someone just said in the chat, I am in a blue city, so I do have that luxury and privilege, especially as a white guy, a white cis man, to be able to not participate in a national election. And like I said, in a state that's only ever gone red once for Reagan. I can comfortably not do that. However, I think for more other people, I think the focus should be on local elections. And if the bullet to bite is to have to vote for a Dem because they are the quote unquote progressive in a local area, then that's fine. I'm not against anybody doing that. I, in fact, in support of that. However, I think a lot of the time people do a lot of lip service and will say, oh yeah, we recognize, and you had said earlier that a lot of Democrats and yourself are critical of the Democratic Party and the Democratic establishment as a whole and don't view it as a solution. But view it as like a necessary means to a solution. I just don't think that, like I said, a band-aid for a bullet hole, I don't think that that solution will end up showing itself just because we voted in the democratic process. I think that change has always come at the will of the people. It's never come on the will of the ballot.
All right, yeah, I recognize the value of local elections, and communists tend to be less, in my perspective, nonsensical about their approach to politics when it comes to their local community, which is something I really agree with you on. I think that a lot of voters need to focus on strengthening their local community more. That's something I preach on this show. I think the analogy is bad, though. I don't think it's a Band-Aid. I think it's a tourniquet. You need the tourniquet to get to the hospital. The hospital isn't on the ballot for November. I want you to be alive when it is.
Sure, and that's a good point, but I think it's a mischaracterization of how this voting system works.
Sorry, hold on. Is it a good point or is it not? Because you just contradicted yourself inside of one sentence. You said it was a good point, and then you said that it wasn't. Which is it? Is it a better point than your Band-Aid?
No, I don't think it is. I think obviously both of them are bad simplifications of how this system is unjust and how the system works. But the job of a tourniquet is to stop the bleeding so that you can get to a hospital, or that if you're a long way from one that you can. My point is that they're not a tourniquet because they're not stopping the bleeding.
I'm really worried that I'm going to go to prison if the Republicans win the midterms in the legislative branch.
Right. I mean, I was worried I was going to go to prison when I was protesting in 2020.
Okay.
Like,
yeah. Right. Do you want to go to prison?
No, of course not.
Okay. Let's vote for not going to prison so we can keep talking about this, because I agree with you about most of your philosophy.
I had people... Right, but voting blue doesn't necessitate not going to prison. Again, December of 2020, the amount of people arrested
you recognize your privilege. You recognize you're a young white man who lives in a progressive city. I don't think you recognize a lot of the progress that has happened, and it's unfortunate for the people who have benefited from that progress that you're sitting here not recognizing it. I think it's ungrateful. I think it demonstrates that you're, in the context of a privileged person living in America, it makes you a spoiled brat to not recognize the progress we've made.
I mean, that would just be resort to ad hominems instead of actually attacking the point about how Democrats are not actually.
Not an ad hominem. I'm not saying you're a spoiled brat and therefore I don't like your policies. I'm calling you a spoiled brat because I don't like your policies. It's the other way around. It's not an ad hominem. I'm attacking your character for your political perspectives.
Sure, that's a definition of ad hominem. But like
no, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's not. I'm not saying no. You need to understand this. It's an ad hominem if I attack your character in a way that isn't predicated on your beliefs, or actually not your character. If I attack your person in a way that's not predicated on your character or political beliefs, and then use that to discredit your character or political beliefs, that's an ad hominem. If I called you ugly and said, therefore, your position is bad, that's different than me saying that your position is so bad that it makes me think that you're an ugly person inside.
Yeah, that's but bratty is an ill-intended term meant to dissuade somebody away from saying that they are unreasonable in a situation.
I think it conveys. I think it conveys clearly to my audience how I feel about people who have your political perspective. You're like the house cat. You don't realize that the system is bringing you food. You're not entitled to it in the degree that you think you are, and I think that's irresponsible and the result of you being spoiled by living a privileged life in a country that has made incredible progress over the last 100 years.
Progress for who?
Disproportionately people like you.
Sure, that's exactly my point.
But not negligibly for other people.
Only holds the comforts of us as what only upholds the comforts of us as white people and benefits.
Are women
us.
allowed to vote?
So we look at the situation how things were 100 plus years ago.
Are African Americans
allowed to use? Allowed to continue my point? I've heard you debate before. Like I've had you have conversation with other leftists before.
And I see that you're trying to slip.
Not to be good faith.
You're just working a little too hard to slip past the fact that we have made some pretty serious progress. Would you prefer that we go back to a period where African Americans weren't allowed? Would you allow me to finish the point, and I can explain how we're not? Tell me how it is not sensible to point out at this point in the conversation that African Americans are now in fact allowed to use the same businesses.
Is slavery legal in the United States? Yes or no?
Yes, it is.
Great. How is that any better than what we had? Right? Like, fix me on this point.
What percent? Wait. Have we made improvements? Have we made improvements in terms?
I can't even finish my point because of the because of the basic reason of we have TVs now. We must be better. I'm not saying you're making that argument.
Not my argument.
I know it's
Would you rather be
an exaggeration.
So to clarify for the audience, because not everybody has your background on this, we're talking about incarcerated persons. The Constitution allows indentured servitude for people who've committed crimes.
Brother, slavery, not indentured servitude. Slavery. It says slavery. Use the word slavery.
I did.
Like, be for real.
I did.
No, you said indentured servitude. It's slavery.
You asked me point blank. You asked me. You're not being good faith. You asked me point blank if slavery is legal. I thought about it for 1 second and thought, oh yeah, it is. Seriously, dude, can you let me explain the way in which slavery is legal to my audience? They know I use the word slavery. I think they have a longer attention span. I'm sorry. I'm agreeing with you on this topic and trying to give background to the audience so they know what we're talking about. Can you let me do that? I'm a professional at this.
You don't seem like one.
Adorable. Anyway, here's my question for you about slavery in this country. Because it is clear to say that somebody who's incarcerated and doing labor for the state is a slave. I agree with you. Would you rather be a slave today or 200 years ago?
Brother, either way, we're slaves. Like, slavery's slavery.
No, it's not. We don't whip slaves anymore, do we? We used to whip people. We whip slaves in this country?
Yes.
With a whip?
Just became a baton. Yes, the whip just became a baton.
I would rather be hit with a baton than a whip, you idiot.
Of course, you're white. You don't have an actual privilege of being from. You have a privilege of not experiencing that, or being in an area.
No.
This is experience that.
No. Are you suggesting that we haven't made any progress on slavery in this country since 1776?
Well, of course we made different progress from 1776. Like, no shit, Sherlock. It's about the context of the material conditions.
We haven't.
It's about the context of the material conditions and the material society that we are under dialectically. It is not about, of course, we have TVs now, so therefore everything is better than 1776 because we have TVs, or because we have this, or because we have that, right?
I'm talking about slavery, dude. I'm not talking about TVs.
Oh my goodness, brother. Let me finish the point.
You're bringing up straw mans because I'm not saying it's because we have iPhones that slavery is okay.
I'm just trying to explain
stop saying that up. Stop bringing that up. I didn't say it. That's a straw man.
I'm just trying to explain. I don't know why you're so upset. I'm just trying to explain my point and my position, and you're not allowing me to do so. The mischaracterization and straw man is...
I feel like I'm giving you a good shot, dude.
You haven't. I haven't been allowed to finish 1 point. The 1 point I got allowed to finish was my first thing up here, clarifying about my Band-Aid versus bullet hole. Like, let's be for real.
I feel like that was a more productive conversation.
Sure, and it can be, without you interrupting my points of allow me to finish and making my correlation. Like, it's crazy. First off, like someone else said in the comments too, about the wage slavery is another thing that's in the aspect of the country. But what you're ignoring is the material realities that we are under. Of course, we are not in 1805, where slavery is running wild across the entirety of the United States. That slavery now has just slavery.
Do you think it's fair to call that progress? Oh my goodness!
Allow me to finish a point.
No. Do you think that? I'm going to insist that you answer my question. Do you think it's fair to call it?
Then you're bad faith. Then you're
do you think that it's fair? The audience can judge whether or not I'm being bad faith. I just want you to answer my question. That thing that you just described about stop interrupting me. I will kick you from my show because I don't use the mute button. And what happens next is you answer my question. I have a very specific question. You just described the state of affairs getting better for slavery in this country. Do you think it's fair to call that progress?
The double standard of interrupting versus appealing to your chat that obviously follows you is crazy. Free Palestine, you're bad faith, man.
hit the run button. Goodbye. When we had the episode where the thumbnail said the 2 types of communists, where I spent an hour talking to a communist in good faith about how we agree on most everything and disagree about the path forward, and we actually lamented that a lot of communist callers are deeply unreasonable. We then had a second caller who called in and demonstrated that me and that other reasonable communist were completely right about people like the caller who just called in. Who was that second caller? I remembered you. We've been through all this shit before. It's not a Band-Aid, it's a tourniquet. Argue otherwise before moving on to slavery for no fucking reason. If you like the Oskar Quentin Show, you can go to Linktree in my bio and follow me on the other platforms. 10K on YouTube's on the horizon because we had 3K when Dean shouted me out, and we're approaching 6, and I just feel like it's slow and steady. So the more of you that follow on there, the better. You can follow down here on Oskar Quentin 2 if you're watching on TikTok. That's the backup account for if the show gets banned on this account because I accidentally say something I'm not supposed to say, like the name of a substance or, the types of things that the president got up to with Jeffrey Epstein, all that stuff. Got to be careful about how I talk about that. Supporting me on all the platforms helps out. There's a Discord link in the Linktree in the bio now. You do have to fill out a ticket and convince us that you're not going to be trouble on there because it's a pretty sacred community that does a lot of work for this show. So I'm very excited about what's going on in the Discord, and lots of people have been asking about it in the comments and stuff. If you want to get in on that, there is a link for you to fill out an application and see if you can get in. We're over 100 strong. And my goodness, does the Discord get work done quickly. I'm sitting here looking at a feed of curated information about the Supreme Court rulings today that's going to be helpful for me live on the show. So W Discord for that. And if you want to support the show materially, you guys know the way. Venmo, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, or Patreon. And I am working on an international option because I know some international viewers are having trouble with that. But I appreciate all the support. It means that I get to do this completely full time. It means I get to focus on streaming for more than 2 hours a day, not just 10 to 12 Central Time, but hopefully eventually 10 to 2 Central Time because I've hired 2 people to help with the editing and the workload around the show. So W staff. We're also going to thank Francisco for the $2 on Venmo for saying W for IowaGolfer in general, discusses in good faith. I feel like he's few arguments away from an epiphany. He's had a number of small epiphanies on the show, and I think that you are right. And delightfully, those epiphanies stick. There are things that he is no longer in disagreement with me on because I convinced him months ago. So now he gets to call in and we get to build on that progress. And that's really what good faith argumentation is. If you're wrong about something, you need to take that to heart. When I'm wrong about something, I get corrected, and that changes my perspective going forward. And we don't see that very much. We see people admit they're wrong on my show, hop over to a buddy's live, and then I hop over to that live when I'm done with my show, and there they are right back at the beginning like a goldfish. They don't remember that they admitted that their argument was bad. They just started back over at the beginning with the next call. That's being disingenuous. We see that a lot. Not from IowaGolfer. So more W's in the chat for IowaGolfer. Araxis sent me oh wait, no, that was yesterday. Thank you, Araxis from yesterday. But Joseph sent me $5 on Cash App to say, keep it up, bro. You too, Joseph. I appreciate you supporting the show. And I'll just double check that we have anything on Super Chat because the queue is filling up and I'd like to get through the ad reads so we can keep the show going. Rabbit sent somebody a membership on YouTube. W's in the chat for Rabbit. And Butt Mustard sent me another $2 to say, we want to know what M was playing. Yeah, we had a caller a couple calls ago who was clearly hamming away on the Xbox controller while on call, which, come on. There's a lot of people watch the show. Pay attention. Give me your full attention if you call up. Now we've got a pretty full queue, so we are going to talk to Sean after I remind everybody on TikTok to keep double tapping away on the screen so more new people see the conversation. We've got 48 new friends joined today, and I like to get that number to double digits. It's really good for the show if we get pushed out to the For You page in that way. Sean is going to start by telling us how old he is and then telling us his political position. How old are you?
Hey, 44.
44. Do you support Trump? Yeah, I recognize the name and picture, but I can't place you. You don't support Trump?
You're good. No, fuck Trump. I just wanted to say that was super entertaining. I always love it when communists come up because you do such a great job pinning them down. I'm so sad that he fucking ran away because I'm like, you little bitch, get back in here and support your position. And
love you, Sean. And you're right. I am sad that communist ran. I think he learns faster and faster every time he calls in that Oskar Quentin is not the place for your bullshit. We're going to talk to Jaden, and we're going to see if that is a Trump supporter or not. How old are you, Jaden?
21.
21. Are you a Trump supporter?
No, I'm also a communist.
All right, let's go. What do we got? I'll let you take the floor.
Sure. I just think it's ironic that you say stop to the last guy, because I follow him as a friend of mine, to say stop interrupting me as you're actively interrupting him, and then saying appeal to the chat about whether I'm bad faith or not when they obviously follow you is an appeal to the audience.
The show isn't a communist environment, though. Like, actually, so here, let me just talk about
that doesn't matter. I don't care about the politicizing of it all. I'm just saying that is objectively appeal to the audience and is a fallacy.
No, it's not a fallacy. I'm exercising the rights that I have. So I want to talk about this generally because it doesn't have to do just with how I handle with communists. communists, but people who think I interrupt too much anyway. If we look at my show, we do see that I get more.
Keep whining, please. Free Palestine.
You're going to run too? Okay, so I'll talk about it after he ran. Just so you guys know, this show is a private enterprise. It's on a private platform that I have to obey. And if you're my guest, you're in my private enterprise and you have to obey me. I'm a theater kid. I recognize that the production environment is fascistic. It should be. If you don't want to participate in it, you can leave. It's not a government. It doesn't have to do with people's rights. I'm not in your house unless you want me to be, unless you log in and listen to me. So yes, I direct the show. If you can't handle it, that's fine. If you think that I look bad for how I run the conversations, make your own videos about that. Say, Oskar Quentin sucks. Look at how he runs his conversations. I run my conversations in a way that I believe is a good faith effort to get my audience to understand what the guest is saying. And that first communist caller was a perfect example of him breezing past explanations because he knows that I understand his perspective. He knows that he understands his perspective, but I know that not everybody in my audience understands his perspective. So yes, I'm going to demand that I take the floor and clarify some things. And if you think I'm doing a bad job, check all those numbers next to my usernames on all the accounts and see if it's accurate that I'm doing a bad job getting my perspective out into the world. Go make a documentary about how much I suck if you think I suck that much and see if people watch it. We're going to talk to Hale. I'm going to see if Hale is a communist. Maybe not. W's in the chat for Scout. That's my cat, Scout. She likes being on the show. She doesn't. If she knew how famous she was, she'd be miserable. Hale, how old are you?
27.
27. Are you a Trump supporter?
No. I'm not communist either. I just want to make sure. I just want to ask a question.
Quick question, and then I'll kick you. I'll answer your question after I kick you.
Yeah, it was about the reliant on government data based on homicides, specifically about how that there's no law, specific federal law that can assist them in government that can accurately measure people who die in police custody. And that's due to the fact that if they can't measure deaths in police custody, how can anyone trust let's say the CDC homicide mortality rate?
Yeah, I think that across the board, we need transparency reform in law enforcement agencies. I agree, that's a really big problem. There's I forget what it was. There was a rule change or a law change somewhere recently that I think ICE isn't required to now release information about people who pass away less than 30 days after they're released from ICE custody, which is concerning because if you say, for example, have an elderly detainee who is exposed to cold and not given enough food while they're in custody, they might die of pneumonia a week later. And that would be attributed as a homicide to the people who neglected them. So there's we're eroding away the protections that exist to make sure that people aren't harmed in custody, whether or not they die. And yeah, I agree, big problem. But I also think that that's part of a way bigger issue about transparency and just the practices of law enforcement agencies generally. So I think we're on the same page there. We're gonna talk to Leah, who might be in the queue by accident. I think she's a friendly. I think I recognize her username from the chat. We shall see. If she can connect. Nah, see, she's teacup. That's why she's not connecting. She doesn't know that she's here. Hello. Did you mean to join? I don't think she meant to join. But the queue is empty, so get double tapping away on the screen to get some more Trump supporters or potentially communists in here. Apparently, we're talking about communists because the Supreme Court scared all the Trump supporters away. Perhaps. There's a balance change. Where's the notifications? Oh my goodness. Chris sent me $20 on Venmo. How nice of Chris. Chris with a K. W's in the chat for Chris. I love how calm you are and how knowledgeable. Not calm all the time, Chris. We got to see Spicy Oscar today because I was talking to a Phil bro who didn't know I was a Phil bro. I said that and I got I got messages about people who were like, oh no, you were a Phil bro. It was a joke, guys. I was never like a smarmy, misogynistic asshole Phil bro, but I was a philosophy student in college who ran the philosophy club and quit because it was full of Phil bros. And that's my experience with Phil bros. Is I learned about the Phil bros by being the president of the philosophy club at a college in Minnesota and not being able to stop it from becoming a misogynistic incel echo chamber of dread. I addressed it with the professor I was working under. He wasn't interested in addressing like the social issues we were having in the club, and I resigned because I just couldn't put up with the fact that people were leveraging all of these hyper-specific pieces of terminology to make bad arguments when we ended up spending half the meetings with me moderating and saying, hey, you're using this definition of the word, which I don't think is a good one. I think it's a misogynistic one. You're using a different definition of this word. I think your definition is also wrong and misogynistic. Here's what the textbook, the dictionary, and I say about the definition, and you guys are just sitting here smelling each other's incel farts. I didn't want to keep doing it. So I've got the chops to deal with to deal with Philbros. And I do miss the occasional vocabulary term. That Philbro was really proud of the fact that he brought up a couple words I had to Google, because I haven't been formally involved in that stuff in, oh goodness, what's it been? 7 years, something like that. So like, yeah, I have to Google what the occasional technical term means, because I'm not sniffing those farts so much anymore. But once I Google them, I go, oh yeah, that. Okay, no, I remember. Your argument is still bad, because now I know what that word means, and here's me using that word in a conversation with you to demonstrate that I know your argument to be bad. And that's what happened yesterday. But I got to yelling, because that guy wouldn't do basic propositional logic. He believed in A, he believed in B, but he wouldn't say, I believe in A and B, because that made him look bad when we were talking about how he recognized that Trump is probably a rapist. So, yeah, I kind of enjoy battle with the Philbros. It's one of the more like a Philbro, we shall battle. Like, it's like feels more like I'm playing like a video game or something. It's like, but it just doesn't feel all that productive. I don't think the Philbros are a big voting bloc. I think their particular type of fart sniffer are the type to come on TikTok lives and get to farting. I wish they farted out of their ass instead of their mouth, but nothing we can do about that except for block them. But I don't know. They're good for the show. I think it's kind of fun. Jason sent me $2 on YouTube Super Chat after Kevin sent me a gift. Thank you for the gift, Kevin. Jason sent me $2 to say Trump admin official you'd most like to interview. Ooh. That's a really good question. I'd have to like look at the cabinet, because of the big names, I feel like I would most want to interview Hegseth, just because there's the most to grill him on. Todd Blanche. Yeah, Todd Blanche. That slippery lawyer. I like talking to slippery adversaries. Yeah, probably Todd Blanche. Yeah. Because we had Pam Bondi scapegoated for her behavior on the Epstein files, but of course now that she's fired and there's nothing going on, it's also entirely possible she was fired for health because she has cancer, so it might have just been unrelated. But yeah, I think probably Todd Blanche. I'd want to talk to him about the 2020 election, and I'd want to talk to him about the Epstein files. If I talk to Hegseth, I'd want to talk about the double taps. I'd want to talk about the school we bombed. I'd want to talk about some of that stuff. Those are good questions. I don't think I'm quite on the radar of the Trump administration. Well, that's not true. JD Vance knows who I am. But aside from that, I don't think I'm on the radar to get on TV talking to any of them. But there are some more like my level people, or like just above my level people I really want to talk to. I really want to talk to Savannah Hernandez. I really want to talk to people like Nick Shirley. I want to discuss Minnesota with Nick Shirley. He's on my list. The Kenny sent me €5, I think that is, on YouTube Super Chat to say communists can't even stick around for a full conversation and expect us to believe that they are going to bring about a revolution. Yeah, those people, those are the revolutionists. Those are the revolutionaries, the people who are going to change America for the better. It's those kids coming up here and yelling at me about how it's a Band-Aid, not a tourniquet, and not having an argument to defend that, or any argument about how to actually fix what's going on in the country. I don't know. Araxis is sending me cash apps. I should get them in order. Araxis says conservatives can exist in a progressive society. They can, but progressives suffer in a conservative one. Oh yeah, good point. It's not a two-way street, Araxis. Thank you for the 2 $5 donations on Cash App, and I'll hop over to my email to check out Lucky Phil, who sent another Buy Me a Coffee. W's in the chat for Lucky Phil for reminding people I have a Buy Me a Coffee, because it's there, and he's the only one who's sending donations in on it. So thank you, Lucky Phil. Incel Farts is the name of my Weezer cover band. W's in the chat for Lucky Phil, whose name is spelled the same way as Phil in Philbro. So he's got a personal gripe with the Philbros for besmirching his name. I think that's all the gifts. Thank you, everybody. Linktree in the bio if you want to support the show. And we are going to talk to Sherlock Holmes. Let's see if he's investigated the Trump administration and come to a reasonable conclusion about it. Sherlock Holmes, how old are you?
Yeah, I'm 19.
Are you a Trump supporter?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Sorry. I recently turned 20. My bad. June 26th.
I believe you. I believe you. You a Trump supporter?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, because I agree with his social policies and/or stances, and he's upkept those social policies and/or stances that he holds.
Which social
even
policies?
Currently? I said policies and stances. So, for example, like he would be more pro-life than the other candidate, Kamala Harris. Like I don't support him as like an individual president, but I would support him in the way that I think he's the better candidate. So I can agree that he's a bad president, but he's just better than the other candidate.
Sure. So you think that abortion is more important than everything else, or do you have other? I think
abortion is a very, very, very important one because abortion is murder. So.
I don't think it is.
Okay, well, we can just discuss that.
Okay.
So Schmurder's just...
you can say murder on my show. I don't want to hear Schmurder.
Yeah, you don't care? Okay.
I don't give a shit. Thank you for being careful,
cool.
but I don't give a shit.
Yeah, so murder is just going to be the intentional, unjustified termination of life. We agree with that, right?
I don't think that's a fair definition of murder at all. I think that if you include that as your definition of murder, there are a lot of things that are murder that are obviously not murder.
Like what?
Unplugging a brain-dead patient.
Well, that would just be question begging that it's unjustified. I wouldn't say that's unjustified. So, right.
Right. Okay. I do. Right, but I do think it's justified termination of a human life to perform most abortions. So that's where we disagree. But I think that
if you're we'll just get to that.
Yeah, if you're going to define that, like we have to define what makes the termination of a human life unjustified. And I think it's really, really important to measure whether or not a person suffers or has ever suffered before. And I don't think that. I think that the unborn children who are young enough to be aborted have done neither. Which means I don't measure.
So you want me to investigate your position?
I just don't. I only care about suffering when I define things like murder, because we're using words like unjust to define murder, because murder is just unjustified homicide. So I just don't. I also think that we can even attack whether or not the word homicide is appropriate, given that I don't think that we should give personhood to zygotes. So there's a bunch of ways.
What's a person?
What's a person? Ooh, that's a very good. A person is, I would say, a human who has developed enough suffering for us to care about their rights.
What's the threshold for like enough suffering for us to care about their human rights?
If I was God, if I were Laplace's demon, if I had perfect clairvoyance about exactly what was going on in every person's head, and I knew exactly how much a person had the capacity to suffer, I would wager that I'd probably find it much later in the pregnancy that the sort of suffering I care about is possible. But because we don't have a perfectly clear lens, what we do is, out of an abundance of caution, we draw the line much earlier than that. And we say, let's make sure that we only abort unborn children whose brains have not developed to the point that the neurologists and the philosophers that study consciousness are at all convinced that there's any possibility any of that stuff is happening. So that's where we draw the line.
So when consciousness arrives.
That's not what I said. I said that we don't know when consciousness arrives, but we can be sure when it hasn't, because we have reasonably good knowledge about the sorts of structures in the brain from which consciousness arrives. If we understood consciousness better, I bet we could move the date back farther, but because we don't understand a consciousness very well, it's not a very good line. So we have to go earlier than that and say, not only do we not know that when exactly consciousness starts, but we know that a fetus that's 14 weeks old almost certainly doesn't have it. And when we don't have certainty about things, we do have to go by what we're almost certain about. That's the case for literally everything else. I don't know why people apply such strict rules about that to abortion when they don't to things like the medications that we use to treat heart ailments, or the way that we handle patients who've had a stroke, where we also have to make probabilistic decisions about human suffering. I just think it's inconsistent the way you think about it for people who aren't people yet, by my own definition.
Yeah, right. So when they're conscious, they're able to suffer, therefore they're a person. Yeah?
No, I don't think that. I think that that's an oversimplification of my point, and I think you know it.
What was the extra detail that I missed if it was oversimplified?
Okay. You said that if a person is conscious, therefore they can suffer. I think that is already hairy. I don't necessarily think that suffering is a necessary component of consciousness. I think there probably are conscious beings on Earth that don't suffer because they lack the capacity to suffer. I bet there are species of animals that are conscious but don't suffer because their brains never evolved the need for it for some reason. So I think that that's already a hole in that argument. It's one that I plugged with my longer explanation, but it's one that you created by making it more concise, which is why I refuse to agree with it, even though you are pretty much on the right track. I'm just being careful, because you're obviously the type of caller with whom I need to be really careful about my words. I have other problems with that line of reasoning, but it's already predicated on a proposition that I don't agree with, so we can stop there.
So what was the extra detail? You just said that it was oversimplified.
I'm sorry. Do I need to slow down?
Yeah, sure. You just said be careful with your words and stuff.
Yeah, you said that if something's conscious, therefore it can suffer, and because the unborn children that we're aborting aren't conscious yet, therefore they can't suffer, therefore not person. And I said, no, that's not specifically what I said, and I just pointed out my problem with one step in your chain of reasoning, which is that I actually don't think that consciousness necessarily means that suffering can happen. That's not obvious to me.
Okay. So what's the type of thing that needs to happen in order for them to be able to suffer?
We don't know very well, but that's why we draw the line so much earlier than any of it can happen at all.
So you don't know?
I've already said that. I don't know exactly.
Okay. So
Do
I
you,
guess
think,
we
do
can
you
just
think that a fertilized egg can suffer? Like at the moment of conception, do you think that fertilized egg is capable of suffering?
if it depends what you would define suffering as. If you define suffering as some sort of harm, then yeah. If
no,
you
that's
don't,
not what.
then
No,
no.
suffering. No. Harm is arbitrary, and suffering is experiential. Suffering is harm experienced by a being. So no, I think that you and I are in very different places. If you're going to argue, like what I was going to do is say it's obvious to me that a single-celled organism can't suffer. There's not enough neurology in it for that phenomenology that Daniel Dennett wrote all those books about trying to explain consciousness that I've read over the years. I'm thoroughly convinced that a single-celled organism cannot suffer in the way that I think is meaningful to this discussion. If you do, I think your position is nonsense, and we should talk about that instead of everything else we've said so far.
Yeah, if you define suffering as, I believe you said some sort of experiential harm.
Yeah, do you know what the word phenomenology means?
Then, I've heard of it. I'm not like super familiar with it.
Phenomenology is kind of a technical philosophical term for looking at what consciousness is. It's about, like, you can imagine what it's like to be me, right? You can imagine that my field of vision is, there's a screen in front of me. I can tell you that there's a big PA speaker to the left and right of the TV. You can believe me or not, but you can imagine that if I'm telling the truth, I'm seeing that even though you aren't. That's the phenomena that I'm experiencing. Phenomenology is the study of the perspective of conscious beings in philosophy. So I don't think that a rock, for example, has phenomenology. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So I can cut up a rock to make it into a brick to build a house, and that's not an ethical concern, right? Like it's just matter, right?
Well, I also just don't think you can do wrong things to inanimate objects. But yeah.
Right. And the reason that you can't, I think that in my ethical framework, the reason that you can't do anything wrong to an inanimate object is because we call something inanimate if it meets certain qualities, and among those qualities are the sort that make us sure that it doesn't have phenomenology. We're pretty sure that it is only animate things that have phenomenology. Even a person who's fully paralyzed, locked-in syndrome, there's still activity happening. Their heart beating is movement. Their neurons firing. The electrolytes crossing the synapse in their neurons is movement. That's animation. The rock doesn't have that, so we go, the rock certainly doesn't have phenomenology. We definitely don't need to give the rock rights. But there are organisms that do have animate qualities, that do move, that I personally don't think have phenomenology. This is an edge case, so don't be mean to bugs on my behalf, but I think, not as sure, pretty sure based on what I know about insects and arachnids, that they don't suffer. I don't think butterflies suffer if you kill them. I don't think mosquitoes suffer if you kill them. I don't think spiders suffer if you kill them. They might be important to the environment, and that's a consideration for other suffering beings, but they're animate, they move, but they lack those neurological structures that I think are responsible for phenomenology, and you need phenomenology in order to suffer. So if I'm unconvinced thoroughly that something has phenomenology, then I don't worry so much about its suffering. And I think that's the case for unborn children below a certain age. Because my point I was going to get to earlier, if you agreed with me that a single cell can't suffer, I think it's nonsense that you think it can, or that if you define suffering in a way that a single-celled fertilized egg can suffer, then your definition of suffering is utterly meaningless to ethics in my book. I was going to say at the other end of the coin, a baby the day before it's born, I think, can suffer. So we have to really study where we think that switch turns on, because it's going to be a gradual process, mostly in terms of the anatomy, and we don't exactly know. Like I said, Daniel Dennett's written a lot of books trying to puzzle out exactly how the lights flicker on in terms of consciousness and phenomenology and suffering. But we can say, okay, how about 2 days after the egg is fertilized? Probably still not phenomenology, therefore no suffering. A week later, again, couple cells, no neuroanatomy. Almost certainly no consciousness, suffering, phenomenology, and we can get all the way up to about 20 to 24 weeks, and then I go, okay, the neurologists think around there is where things start flickering on, and I would argue it's probably some weeks later that the actual phenomenology that I'm worried about happens, but out of an abundance of caution for preventing human suffering, that's where we draw the line.
Would you give things like pigs personhood?
Nope. My definition of personhood from earlier involved the word human.
Oh, they're human. Oh, well, that's also going to be an issue, but you might complain about it because they're extreme hypotheticals.
So single-celled organisms can suffer and pigs are people. Are these your stances that you're bringing me?
No, well, first off, they're critiques, but we can get into the more philosophical, in-depth ones, I guess, since you actually seem very familiar with them. Whenever you say something like, we can't do wrong to rocks or butterflies, but we can...
I'm more certain, to be clear to everybody, I am more certain about the rocks than I am the butterflies. I like the insects as an example, because I think that, like, you know, sometimes insects are cute and people like butterflies and stuff, but I don't see enough. The neuroanatomy that they have is basically getting used up to keep them moving and keep them feeding and flying and stuff. And I just don't think there's phenomenology happening. I'd be very interested in reading a paper on, you know, trying to prove me wrong on that. I just bring them up as a sort of edge case I like to talk about as like an educational piece on this. But I think if I were a betting man, if I had to bet whether or not butterflies could suffer, I would say no, I don't think they can.
Yeah, so whenever you say something's right or wrong, I take it that you have to probably affirm some sort of like normative theory. So I'm curious on which normative theory you affirm.
Sorry, which normative theory? Define normative theory for me.
A set of principles that you form into a system that tell you and guide your actions towards which ones are wrong and which ones are right.
I value suffering, and I value human suffering more than other kinds of suffering.
That's not a normative theory. It's going to be like utilitarianism, consequentialism, virtue ethics, particularism, and so on.
I subscribe to Rawlsian ethics, which is basically utilitarianism with some asterisks for if you create a rule that disproportionately advantages a group that's already disadvantaged.
So utilitarianism. Okay, cool.
With the Rawlsian asterisks for creating rules that disproportionately benefit prior disadvantaged groups.
Yep. Yeah, how do you deal with, do you know the, who's called the over-demanding kind of critique?
No, remind me.
Yeah, so it's just going to say that utilitarianism, even the type that you subscribe to, is going to be overly demanding towards maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain, to the point of where you might even have to say that taking your girlfriend out to eat for dinner is an immoral action because you didn't maximize pleasure. You could have, instead of taking out your dinner to a dinner, you could have donated to charity, therefore not maximizing pleasure, so that would be a wrong action under utilitarianism.
I think that's nonsense. I don't think that's a valid criticism of utilitarianism generally. I think that if we look at a longitudinal view of people's lives that consider what the rest of their lives are like, it's obvious that we should care for ourselves disproportionately over caring for other people. Otherwise, we run into the issue where everybody spends all their checks on donating food to charity instead of paying rent, and then we have a homelessness crisis. So no, I think it's silly and short-sighted. You're looking through a pinhole if you think that defeats utilitarianism. We should be allowed to have fun. That's why we're here.
Oh, well, utilitarianism doesn't care about your self-interest. It cares about everybody's around you.
Yes.
So if it disproportionately...
It considers my suffering and everybody else's, and if we have a longitudinal view of the sort that I was just describing of everybody's life, you get the answer that I just said.
Yeah, everybody's life, meaning that this action could be right, or the right action to do.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that that doesn't mean, but a utilitarian viewpoint averages the actions of all people against the effects on all people. You don't have to zoom in on one person.
So I don't know why you point it out to yourself.
I am right. So I'm saying you can't zoom in on one person and say that because you didn't equally divide your paycheck among all the world's perils, therefore you're not behaving in a utilitarian way. It is more utilitarian to say, oh, Oscar's really good at talking about politics. Instead of donating his money to charity, people from TikTok and YouTube and stuff should pay his rent so he can run his show. That increases the utility for everybody, even though I'm focused on one specific narrow thing. And we can say the same thing about somebody buying a nice dinner for their girlfriend. That might be a local win that's worth it in the long run because people should be allowed to enjoy their lives. That's important for progress.
Okay, yeah, and that's part of the critique is you actually possibly can't enjoy your life because you're not maximizing pleasure, right? So obviously buying dinner for you and your wife or girlfriend, whatever it may be, that's not maximizing pleasure. We can agree on that,
I don't seek to maximize pleasure. I seek to maximize something more nuanced than that, which is societal well-being, which is not measured by pleasure, because pleasure would be some measure of something neurochemical like dopamine.
Oh, that just doesn't seem like utilitarianism to me then.
Then your perspective on utilitarianism is silly, which is something I already knew about your perspective on utilitarianism for things that you've said over the last few minutes.
Yeah. Well, is pleasure a great contributing factor towards society's well-being? Mm-hmm. You say yeah? Mm-hmm. What other factors, I guess, would contribute towards a society's well-being?
Your ability to cooperate with others without negatively affecting their suffering or happiness.
And which ones is that?
Which, for example, if you're like almost said it, TikTok flags. I'm getting too distracted by the Philbro I'm talking to. H drug. If you're taking H drug, your neurochemical happiness might be through the roof, but your effect on society is probably very bad. So the utilitarian says that no, we probably shouldn't support people becoming addicted to the H drug. We should probably give them treatment. We also probably shouldn't just incarcerate the shit out of them.
I actually agree with that, by the way.
See how we're losing the viewers? People aren't all that interested in these conversations. It's just like, you know, I like spent so many years in school studying all these terms, which is why I can sit here and like bat all these bad ideas away. But like, it's just not that interesting, dude. Like nobody cares that you've got big words for the same stuff the rest of us are talking about on the platform.
Never. I didn't really use any big words. Utilitarianism is like the biggest word I used, dude.
I talk to a lot of people on here. It's a big word for a lot of people. It's an inaccessible way to talk about this stuff. It's unnecessary in most contexts. That's my chief complaint against the Philbro. We leverage hyper-specific technical knowledge in specific fields, right? Like I talk a lot about just... Sorry, which one what?
Which word did I use that was highly technical?
I consider the word utilitarianism in an ethical context to be a highly technical term for an uneducated layperson, and this show is largely for uneducated lay people.
Bro, I knew what that word was before I even studied philosophy.
Congratulations. How nice. How privileged.
It's not that complicated of a word.
You're not the only... Yeah, but you're not the only person on the planet, right? You do realize that a utilitarian perspective might consider that fact?
Yeah, I considered that fact. It's just, I would consider the fact that the odds of me knowing a highly technical philosophical term before I studied...
So I'm going to cut you off right now to finish what I was saying a second ago, which is that people...
Clarifying questions are justified, FYI.
Congratulations. I'm going to continue my point, which is...
So your interruption was unjustified, while mine was? Just to clarify.
Tempted to mute you, man. I'm really trying to say what I'm trying to say, which is that there are certain contexts in which we allow like really hyper-technical prescribed language. Mostly I defend descriptivism, where we just use the words as people know them so that you can talk to most people. But there are certain contexts where that's really inadvisable. That's why we have medical terminology. Medical terminology is highly prescriptivistic because it's necessary to the safety of patients to make sure that doctors are all speaking the same language, and it's necessary for us to be understood by my audience that we establish the definitions of these words. And what I'm pointing out is that you might be right, but much like the meme, you're not wrong, you're just an asshole for using these terms, because it would be more egalitarian of you. It would better promote people understanding your perspective if you used the simplest available terminology to make your point, which you are very intentionally not doing. That is my chief complaint against the Philbros.
I'm not intentionally doing this. This is just how I speak, even in normal everyday conversation.
You should work on that. You should care more about the fact that it's hard for people to understand what you're talking about or give you airtime because of the way that you speak. You're not really...
My own parents complain about it.
I'm not surprised.
So anyways, and also then I haven't used, like, again, to my knowledge, anything highly technical to purposely try to knowledge gap you or anything like that.
Right. You are being a prescriptivist about what you consider highly technical to be. When I'm sitting here, a person who I'll pull the authority a little bit. I'll make an argument from authority, which I'm sure you're gonna have a problem with, which is just that I have a lot of experience talking to people. I taught public speaking for years. I taught STEM students for 6 years how to deliver complicated information to people who didn't understand it. And I would advise them to only use the technical terms when they absolutely need to, and to define them clearly at the onset. And the Philbros do the opposite. They create obfuscation. They brag about how smart they are, which you have done by pointing out that you understood utilitarianism before you ever took a Philbro class. And these are just not the tactics of a person
pointing out it's not highly technical.
Yeah, but these are just not the tactics of a person who's working hard to be understood.
I'm willing to explain every single, quote, highly technical term you have an issue with.
I don't think that makes you behaving in a way that is likely to have you be understood by my audience, and I think you know that.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't give a shit about being understood by the audience. I give a shit about being understood by you.
I understand you perfectly well.
Good. That's all I care about.
Goodbye. If he doesn't care what the audience thinks, neither do I. Sorry, everybody. I know the Philbros are a little hefty today. Jody on YouTube Super Chat sent me $5 to say, definitely look into the Necessary Conversation pod. Mary Lou is a professional pretzel maker and a gymnast. She is a boomer, but sometimes there's hope. Somebody messaged me on Instagram, so I actually see it. Pat in the chat sent me $5 to say, you know the South Park episode where people who own EVs like to smell their own farts? Yeah, those are the Philbros smelling their own stench. Absolutely. Oh, he's calling me a runner in the chat. That's fucking adorable. I'm sorry. I thought you didn't care what the audience thinks. I think that means you get muted for the day because you don't care what everybody thinks. Get out of the chat if you don't think what everybody thinks. Come on, be consistent, Phil, bro. Oh, man, I love making the Phil bros upset. All right, let's see. Lucky Phil, who doesn't like the Phil bros, sent me $2 on Buy Me a Coffee to say, sounds like a massive Weezer fan. Love you, Lucky Phil. W's in the chat for Lucky Phil. Corey sent me $5 on Venmo to add, I appreciate your show. Simple message. I appreciate you, Corey. I appreciate your contribution. It'll go to my bills, my cost of living, and the staff that help run this show. David, Emily was first. Can't talk. Too many donations. Emily sent me $10 on Venmo to say, hi, Oscar. Fellow I can never pronounce it. Minneapolitan here. I listen every morning at work. Your common sense approach and ability to call out bad faith debate tactics have helped me spot them in my own conversations. Thanks to you and the team. Keep growing. W for Emily for remembering to thank the whole team, because this show is so much bigger than me already, and I really like to preach about that fact, because I could not be doing this alone. Even though it looks like I'm doing this alone, there's a lot of people who very actively work on the show every day, and those people deserve your love. W staff, W mods, W Discord, W fans, everybody's contributing. Michael sent me $2 to say, caller needs a swirly and a wedgie. I don't know who he was talking about, but I shouldn't talk about it anymore. That might get me a harassment and bullying flag of the old school stereotypical cartoonish type of way. Did I read David's? Yes, I did. Oh, no, I didn't. David said, guest voice sounds like he loves the smell of his own farts, and we should all be so lucky to watch him enjoy them. Well, he can enjoy them all by himself, because I understand them. He doesn't care what the audience thinks, so he can go lock himself in a closet and smell them all to his lonesome. I think that's all I've got. If you want to support the show, you can go to the link tree in the bio, follow me on the various platforms, that sort of thing. Let's get double tapping on the screen. The Phil Bros scare away the audience, so we're having a weak stream today, but what's the concurrent right now? Oh no, only 650 people are watching. I'm so privileged. Seriously, the fact that a bad day is 600 people watching. That's just because I broke 1K yesterday. I'm very excited about that. I'm absolutely over the moon at that I had 1,000 people concurrently watching this show yesterday. That's just like absolutely wild. Coco is correcting me in the chat. There's 204 people watching on YouTube is where I got the number. Anyway, let's get to another caller. We're going to talk to Farah10095. Oh, I remember the username. Is this another communism episode? Hello, Farah.
Hey, how you doing, Oscar? I'm 29.
29. What's your political perspective?
I'm a communist. I am the, according to you, reasonable one.
Oh, yeah, the other guy was back to prove us right once again. Did you catch that part?
Yeah, I heard the guy a couple conversations ago, and then I was, forgive me, I kind of tuned out when it got to the Phil bro. I was like, I can either listen to this guy or I can practice piano, and I'll just wait my turn. So I distracted myself a little bit by doing that. But I'd love to kind of pick up where that conversation left off. And, I'm not in the mood to try and force anyone to agree to anything, but I'd love to kind of explain that perspective to you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I will just say, Raven, who's working for me this afternoon, let me know in the Oscars live chat in the Discord, because I have it open on the screen, how you feel about me running long today. I know I'm expecting you here in the studio apartment. Oh, wait, I'll bring Raven up. Sorry, this is just a little bit of housekeeping, but Raven's here, so I'm just going to ask them about the course of the show, because I just realized we only got 5 minutes left. The Phil Bros made the time fly for me. Raven, how do you feel about running long today?
Hey, if we do, we're going to have to change up the schedule a little bit, and I'll maybe just bring my wife home and then come over.
Oh yeah, we can have you do. No, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna wrap up the call with Farah, and then we're gonna try to get here by 1. I'd prefer that for today.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much. W's in the chat for Raven. Raven is one of the 2 staff members for the show now. Farah, let's have a quick chat. You're gonna wrap up the show today.
Sure. So I'd just like to kind of add, you asked the caller, would you say that we've made progress in slavery from late 1700s to now or whatever? Mm-hmm. And he kind of dodged the question, but I understand why. But I'll go ahead and answer the question and then kind of give you the opposing perspective. The answer is yes. I think we have made progress between then and now. I think that's pretty obvious. I don't think there's any sense in dodging that. I don't like the word progress for it, though. And this is kind of where I'm going to come from there is, should a slave master be allowed progress in order to fix slavery, or should something else be done?
Well, I'm not sure I completely understand your question, but just to first get to this thing about the word progress, I just think that when we look at a bad system getting less bad than it prior was, like, that to me is that's very much a good example of what I think progress by dictionary definition should be. It should be progress is a change from one state to another where the second state is better than the first one. That's like the simplest definition for progress that I can give. So I'm a little curious how you define progress if slavery getting better over the course of history in America, like slavery is an issue getting better in American history, isn't progress.
I don't think I define it any differently than you do. I think where we're having a point of contention is you look at slavery getting better and you say, like, this is progress and therefore this is a good thing. Whereas the communist perspective is going to look at it and say, like, slavery got better because of things like the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King Jr. and people like Malcolm X and stuff taking to the streets and demanding it get better. And everything we have today is not a society or the people that run the society, not necessarily the population, but the people that run the society wanting to do evil and being forced to do less evil. And I think that's a completely different way to look at it than to say, like, well, the society is trying to do the right thing and it's trying to go in the right direction, when in reality, it's really like all the rights and liberties that we have today are apologies for things that were denied to us in the past.
Here's my problem with that perspective. It's a perspective that wouldn't seem very relevant in the middle of the 20th century if we hadn't abolished slavery in the middle of the 19th century. It is progress that we even get to look at it that way.
Can you expand a little bit more?
I don't think that Martin Luther King Jr. would have been a successful civil rights activist if slavery was still legal in the 1960s.
Okay, but like we can go back further, right, and say like slavery getting abolished is more due to stuff like Nat Turner slave rebellions and things like that.
Yeah, I do recognize
and
that
not
Abraham
just
Lincoln,
out of the goodness of someone's heart.
Abraham Lincoln used the abolition of slavery as a lever at his controls as the seat of the executive branch and the commander-in-chief. He wasn't doing it out of the goodness of his heart. I recognize that, but what you're failing to recognize is that it is still because he did that Martin Luther King was a reverend and civil rights activist instead of a slave.
No, I can agree to that.
And I would call that progress. It's because of progress that we got to listen to his speeches. We needed progress to be able to listen to speeches from Black Americans. You recognize that, right?
Yeah. And I think what I'm trying to say here is like the progress that we see is not given to us by those in power. It's taken from those in power by leaders like Martin Luther King, who are going to take to the streets and organize, and not through, top down type sort of stuff where it's just handed to us out of the goodness of some politicians.
Right. But we can peel the onion back and say that we might not want to give our flowers to Abraham Lincoln because, again, I don't think he actually did it out of the goodness of his heart. But we can look at the abolitionist movement that had been growing for decades in this country, who were then a network of people who were ready to give freed slaves a landing. The people who charitably gave those people shelter and jobs and cared for their children while they established their lives. It's the network of people who had been building clubs and organizations around a vision of progress that were there to catch those people when they fell out of the hands of their slave owners. That's progress. Why don't you?
Exactly. Yes,
yeah.
that's what I want to get at, is that progress, like what you're talking about. And I don't think we're speaking like two completely different languages here. I don't think we're like smashing heads or anything, but like progress comes from the people organizing. And that's kind of where the communist perspective comes from. Is that's why, the whole, a lot of communists get a lot more aggressive about who to vote for and who not to vote for, especially. But the communist perspective is we have to collectively do these things. And to get things done, you have to go outside and we have to organize.
Right. I hear that, but I just think that then that just makes it so that our argument is kind of just definitional. Like if if the way that you define progress, it doesn't seem like progress is very important to me. So like, sure, never mind being a progressive, but if you define progress in the way that I have in this call, then you should very much want to be a progressive. And it seems like in the context of the definition that I use, you would agree. You should be a progressive. You should strengthen your local community. You should care about making sure that what happens next in the country is another step forward instead of, conserving the status quo or regressing, which is what's happening in a lot of contexts in American politics right now. And I'm worried about that regression happening faster if the Republicans win the midterms, which is why I say to the communists, you got to recognize that the Republicans winning the midterms in the House or in the Senate would be a fucking L for both people who have your perspective and people who have my perspective. It would stymie that progress.
I agree. And the only thing I would add to that is, with all that being said, if you want to vote in Democrats to stop Republicans from speeding up that process, go for it. But don't let that be a replacement for going outside and community organizing, because that's where the real progress is made.
I will co-sign the shit out of what you just said, and I'd like that to be the final note on today's episode, because I agree completely that we should not let ourselves be complacent and think this is over if the House and Senate flip blue. Like that is an important battle. This is a war.
Okay, absolutely. Well, it's always good talking to you, Oscar. I appreciate the conversation.
W's in the chat for Farah for being a reasonable communist. I'll let you go. Thanks for hopping up.
Yep. Have a good one, man.
I appreciate Farah coming on and just demonstrating to maybe the communists and leftists watching, I'm not unreasonable. Just certain communists and certain leftists are very unreasonable, and they keep calling in and bringing me their unreasonable points. And I just don't like that so much. That's really what I'm upset about. Let's take a look at the donations to make sure nobody gets left behind as the show ends, because I do have a nasty habit of forgetting to read out the donations that come in the last few minutes of the show. Because we did have Melissa on YouTube send a $2 YouTube super chat to say, intellectual masturbation chafes everyone. That's a bumper sticker. Should be a bumper sticker. Lucky Phil sent me $2 more on Buy Me a Coffee to say progression is the opposite of regression. You're either standing still, progressing, or regressing. Every change happens in steps. Quit sniffing your own farts and harumphing over the use of the word progress, because it's not the ideal. Also, dental fund. Be true to your teeth and they'll never be false to you. Yeah. Well, I did have a tooth knocked out when I was a kid. Yeah, we're got to get that fixed because the cap fell off last year. But for those who don't know, we're dentist funding Oskar Quentin because there's a dentist in California who wants to give me a new set of teeth so I can smile proud on the political stage in America. So I am working on making a trip to California during the month of July or August to have that happen. Pat in the chat says Matt's Bar, yay or nay? That's a local ask. Preferable to the 5'8 Club in my opinion, but I'm not personally all that excited about the Juicy Lucy. So nobody knows what I'm talking about unless you're from the local area, and that's fine. $10 from Annika on YouTube Super Chat to say, about a month-long listener, first-time chatter, really appreciate your particular debate style when compared to the other popular hosts. You're doing a great job. Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting that lots of people think I'm doing a good job, which is why I'm able to do this full-time and why I'm able to hire people to help me run the show so I can stream longer. I got to wrap up because I got staff coming in at 1 o'clock today to do some editing and stuff, and I got to be ready for that. Tomorrow, I'm going to go long because the staff is going to be in-house during the show. W staff for being here, sitting over there. That's one of the things I have to do today is set up the producer's desk on the other side of the room. Very exciting, the stuff I'm working on. 10 to 12 Central Time every day, hopefully longer than that, hopefully 10 to 1, hopefully 10 to 2 going forward. It's going to be at least 10 to 1 tomorrow. 10 to 2, we shall see. We shall see. W's for everybody, and fuck the Supreme Court for ruling against trans people. That's really fucked up. Not even all that happy about the 14160 being overturned because it was 5-4, and that's just too damn close to be trying to. We had 4 Supreme Court justices who wanted to affirm that the president can overthrow the Constitution. Let that be the closing note of the show. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 10 o'clock Central Time. Goodbye, TikTok, and goodbye, YouTube.